Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience. I know we're running a few minutes late, so I really want to acknowledge and say thank you for waiting. My name is Lena, and I'm the CEO and founder of Parla, and we have recently become a Holland & Barrett company. And I just wanted to start the day with a little bit of an introduction of why we're here and why this is very, very important for me and for us, and hopefully as a community, why this is really important. So I started Parla because I struggled a lot with my fertility and understanding my body after all the years of really not understanding it. And I think one of the biggest issues with women's health is that even though we're 51% of the world, it's always very marginalized. A lot of the issues that we experience are not believed. And we really need to start breaking those taboos. We need to start having a much better relationship with our bodies, talking about our bodies. And this is why we're here today. And we're here today because we want to start busting those taboos and normalizing it. And we came up with this hashtag of Her Health on the High Street. Obviously, High Street is kind of a little bit figurative, but it's really about this movement that I'm hoping that us as a community and as brands can go towards, which is having these conversations be a regular talk. We shouldn't be ashamed of our periods. We shouldn't be ashamed of our fertility, our pregnancy losses, our menopause. And this is the first of what I hope is many, many conversations so we can start normalizing those things. And I really wanted to say a huge thank you for all the panelists who have come here. They've traveled far. All the different rail strikes have not been on our side. But thank you so much for coming here, for sharing your stories, for sharing your vulnerabilities, because I think it's through those vulnerabilities, through those stories that we are really starting to close this care gap. We have amazing experts here to answer your questions. I want to acknowledge that we might not be able to get through all the questions, but we do have a live stream and people will be capturing your questions. So please do send your questions in and we'll try to get through as many as we can during the day. And this is the first of 4 panels, and we're kind of really trying to cover the reproductive life stages of women. So we're starting with periods, we're going into fertility, and then we're going to have pelvic floor and menopause. So we really hope, stay tuned, because we need to start thinking about our health proactively. So not when we're actually having a struggle. So the conversations need to start at the very beginning, which is where this panel comes in. So I will hand over to Connie, who's going to be moderating the panel. And let's hope, I really, really do hope that this is the first of many and that we will be busting these taboos, having way more talks. And we're going to be talking about periods on the high street everywhere. Thank you so much. And I'll hand over to Connie.
Thanks, Nina. So thanks everyone for joining us in store. So for everyone at home, thank you for joining us as well. So we're in Manchester, we're at the flagship Holland & Barrett store. I can't actually believe how amazing this space is. It's so cool. It's really nice. So I was like, you can get your hair done, you can write to that. And we're here to let's talk, I guess, about periods. So half the world have periods. It's not only women that have periods, people of all genders have periods, but it's still something that we are embarrassed to talk about. You know, for me, when I was at school, having sex education, maybe it's like the girls go in one room, the boys go in another, and it's just really like siloed and ashamed. And in certain cultures, it's even more taboo to talk about these things. But in reality, we need to start talking about them because there are so many people that don't understand that having a painful period, having really bad PMS, having irregular periods, it's not normal. It's like all of this stuff is normalized, and therefore people don't reach out. They don't get the support that they need. We see this all the time at Parla. People are afraid to talk out, or they go to their doctor and they're not believed. 1 in 10 people are dealing with PCOS. 1 in 10 people that menstruate are dealing with endometriosis. And that's just, a really small kind of snapshot of reproductive issues that can be happening when our periods aren't doing what we want to do. We have an amazing expert, Anise, who is slightly delayed due to a rail strike, who is going to be here very shortly to talk more about the kind of different conditions, what your period could be telling you, because really it is a health marker, for us. And we've also got some amazing women here who are going to share their story of the different period health issues that they have had. Lena, I know that you are filling in. So Neelam sadly can't be here because she's not feeling very well due to her endo. I'm sure she won't mind us saying that. But why at Parla, we sort of, fertility was a focus at the start, and we kind of looked at pregnancy loss, and now we've really gone into period health, looking at endo, looking at PCOS. Why are these kind of conditions that we really feel we need to improve access to support for?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this, and I think that's such kind of an important understanding of our bodies. The way we experience our period, like our reproductive lifespan, if you were, like each stage can really affect the next one. So if women are already being not believed about their periods and the problems that they're having with their period, it's going to affect their fertility. If you're then struggling with fertility, it's going to affect you postpartum or post trying. And if then you're going to be struggling with that, it's going to affect your menopause. So we really need to start trying to change the dialogue and the relationship we have with our bodies at the very early stage. And so when I started working with fertility, I was like, oh my God, actually, my knowledge of my period was totally broken even before that. And if I actually had understood and tuned into that 10 years earlier, I would have actually had a much different journey. And that's what it's about. And Linny's, I just saw her running by, so she's going to be joining us in 2 seconds. She talks a lot about the period being your sixth sense. And I think this is one thing that we as a society have kind of put back is whether it's through the contraceptive pill or not being believed, is forgetting about this sixth sense. Like our periods can really tell us a lot about our health and well-being. It dictates how we feel, how hungry we might be. So that's the reason why I think it's really important to start these dialogues and empowering women to understand their bodies a lot earlier.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was a government survey, I think a couple of years ago, and it's only 70% of people feel that they have enough information about their menstrual health, which is crazy when you think about it. It's like something that is happening to us every month, sometimes, and sometimes it's not, and that's a problem in itself. But we definitely need to have these conversations earlier. Denise has arrived, our special expert. Denise. Hi. Perfect timing, because we were just about to talk about, I mean, you've literally written the book on having a better period.
Yes.
But can we start with what a normal period is? Because I think we're told like it should be this or it should be that, and sometimes it's within a window, but we need to know what's normal and when we should be concerned, right?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question. We, as you say, we don't really have a cultural understanding of what a normal period is. So let's change that. So we're looking for a period that's ideally between 3 to 7 days. It's not super painful. So you might get some light cramps. I'm looking at you thinking, yeah.
We spoke.
You might get some light cramps. You might feel a bit sore, but you're not vomiting. You're not fainting. You're not completely depleted. The blood itself is a bright red, maybe goes a bit darker towards the end of your period. From an energetic perspective, we should be able to live our lives. I have to not look at you when I'm thinking about this.
We'll get to that story. My God.
It's a moment. It's 3 to 7 days. It shouldn't dominate our lives. It's part of a wider menstrual cycle. And really, it should be a time where we slow down a little bit, but we're not completely exhausted. So that's what we're looking for in a quote unquote normal period.
Mm-hmm. And we were just chatting about some of the conditions that obviously can a non-normal period can be indicative of.
Yeah.
So could you give a bit of an overview about maybe the key ones that you focus on in your practice and that I guess we'll be talking about today a little bit more?
Yeah, so conditions like endometriosis, where it's a hormonal condition, but really it's a condition of inflammation and immune system dysfunction. And one of the key characteristics of it is pain. So excruciating pain where you feel like you can't do anything. I have had clients where they've had to just lay still, completely still on 1 or 2 days of their period. And if that's every menstrual month, that's very challenging. You have conditions like PCOS, where one of the primary characteristics is irregular periods. So you don't know when your period is coming. And that can be mentally distressing because we hear, oh, our period should come every 28 days. It should look like this. But you're thinking, where's mine, right? And that is distressing because when your period is regular, you can use it almost like a barometer for your health. And you can kind of almost plan your life around it. I know that might sound a bit weird, but it is incredibly helpful. You have a condition like adenomyosis, which is similar to endometriosis, but not the same. But pain is another primary characteristic of that condition. Fibroids, where you have very heavy bleeding. And that's very distressing, where, I've had clients who tell me that they're afraid to leave the house because they don't know if they're going to bleed through their trousers. They have to, always carry spare clothes with them. And that's very distressing. But we've kind of normalized periods being an issue. And it's really important to say that they don't have to be an issue. I'm not being Pollyannish and saying that everyone's going to have a perfect period, but you can have a better period.
Yeah. And I know that we'll come on to some of your amazing tips and advice later on for that. But I wanted to, I know that you'll probably talk, maybe you and Lara will be able to talk together about this, but I think something that loads of women that I talk to about anything like this is something that's really common is you start to have these symptoms, be they irregular periods or heavy periods in your teen years, around puberty. You go to the doctor and it's like, right, just pop you on the pill. That'll get rid of your period. Or this will regulate your period, but it's not really doing anything. It's masking the symptoms. It's, delaying the thing. And Lara, I wanted to talk to you a bit about your experience with your PCOS diagnosis when you were a teen.
Yeah. So firstly, I had to giggle when you were talking about how when you're at school, you'll split into different classes, boys and girls. And you'll talk the basics, and the boys will probably talk about erections or something. And it's like, how are these conversations not happening together? And you're told, black and white basic period 28 days. So when your period doesn't come, or it comes and then it's regular like mine was, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong. And so for a long time, maybe for the first couple of years, I had irregular periods. My moods were all over the place. My mum took me to the doctor. Male doctor, and he said, well, let's do a hormone test. So got those results back, and my testosterone levels were slightly higher, and he said, let's put you on a pill, let's regulate it. That should do it. It's all a bit phased, it's a grey area for me, but it didn't quite work, and things weren't really regulated. And when we looked into it further, I had a scan, and they diagnosed me with PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome, and my ovaries are covered in cysts. And the doctor said to me, bearing in mind I was 16, he said, this does mean that you're going to find it really challenging to get pregnant. Obviously, this isn't something that you need to look into right now, but it's something you should be aware of.
Yeah.
About 4 months later, I got pregnant. And it was a really challenging time for me because I was told you're going to be infertile. So I was kind of dealing with that, not really knowing what that meant because I was still very young. I was having sex, I was on the pill, and I got pregnant. So I had to deal with this whole sort of range of trying to understand my body, trying to get my periods regulated, dealing with the pain, and then on top of it, going through an abortion quite young. And I think for about 5 to 6 years, I tried different pills, I put on weight, I was miserable, I wasn't really feeling any better. I think my periods started to regulate, but my body just wasn't working properly, and it was obviously relying on hormones, which didn't feel very natural. And I think I got to about 20 or my early 20s, and I just decided to stop the pill. I managed my cycles naturally. I got really interested in nutrition. Further in my sort of late 20s, I studied naturopathic medicine. And then I guess I just managed it naturally through nutrition, which I'm happy to go into now, or I don't know if that's something you want
I know, yeah,
we'll go into a little bit later.
Yeah, well, I think we'll talk about that a bit later, along with the niece and what she does. But
so
it's great.
That's overall kind of story of my
PCOS. And I think it's really illustrative of that misinformation that we have, and this lack of knowledge that we have about our own bodies. And then, when you're young, we are just kind of going to the doctors and just think, well, they know best, right? And doctors are great. Love the NHS. I'm not having a go at doctors, but I'm just saying that if we know about our own bodies, we can advocate for ourselves better. We can go in more empowered. It's not one size fits all, 110%. Nat, I'd love to talk to you about your experience. And
Stop looking at me.
because you are such a voice in the sort of endo community, but also fibroids, PCOS, and you're doing so much to kind of just keep this conversation going and get and bring people together that kind of talk about that. So if you're comfortable sharing your story, I'd love you to.
Yeah, no, I started my period when I was 9, so it's very young. But on my dad's side of the family, that was a bit normal because everyone started very early. But it was obviously very different to everyone in my family. When you said like vomiting, my periods were really, really heavy, dark red, which we know now it's not normal. I was clotting. Do you remember like the old school 50p's? So imagine that size was my smallest clot. And then it was like I had like big clots. So obviously, like having that pain, I wouldn't eat, and I was very sporty young. I used to compete swimming. So I couldn't do the sports and everything that I wanted to do. I couldn't stay in class, and then you get asked questions, why are you not in lesson? Oh, no reason. Like I'm in the medical room, like holding my stomach, late, like missing lessons. And I just felt like this is not normal. So I went to my GP. She was really nice, and she just put me on the pill, and that was it. There wasn't any investigations or anything like that, because they saw that I was 15 at the time when they put me on the pill. Then as time went on into my early 20s, like it was ridiculous. I'm in college now, and I'm struggling to do my coursework, everything due to these pains, and my periods. I'm missing college days. And then I was like, no, I need to take myself back to my GP and see what's going on. I asked them, before that, sorry, I spoke to my mum about it because I knew that she suffered really badly as well. And she was like, oh, well, she has a condition called endometriosis, go and see if that's something that you've got. So I said, okay, cool. What is it? She's like, oh, I don't really know. No. So at that time, there wasn't that much research about endometriosis or anything like that. She just got told this is what she's got, and it's just painful periods, and that's it, done. And also she got told she only got it after she gave birth to me. So that being said, it was like they didn't have the research, so don't tell her that bit of information. Went to my GP, spoke to them. They referred me, went and had I can never say this word properly, a laparoscopy. Yeah, there you go, I said it right. And then I got diagnosed with PCOS. Same like you, so I was nodding when you said, they were like, you need to go and get pregnant and all this. And I had a holiday. Yeah, they were like, because I was in my early 20s. So they were like, once you hit like 25 and above, you're like a granny getting pregnant.
That's crazy, yeah.
Right, okay. And I was like, I was going to Greece in the next couple of weeks. I was like,
I'm busy.
I'm going to be living my life. I'm not out here trying to get pregnant. And I'm not I wasn't in a relationship at the time neither. So yeah, I didn't take that on. And I didn't know anyone else that had it. So I really kept everything like to myself and kept it inside. So you're dealing with all this mentally, and obviously mentally it affects you physically, and then after that diagnosis, I was just left. I wasn't given any information or nothing. I was still on the pill, and it didn't control my periods whatsoever. I was still bleeding for like 2 weeks, and then I might have like a week break. And then when I got into fitness and nutrition, then I started to really look into things from there. But I then went back to my GP, spoke about my mum again, and then it was kind of like, well, they were like, well, no, we don't think you have endo. And I was like, why? I have the same size symptoms as my mum. And then they were like, well, where is your mum from? I was like, my mum's Irish. She's Caucasian, she's Irish. Okay, well, no, we don't think you have it. You'll probably have fibroids. So back then, it was more like endo was more of a middle-class white woman's condition, and no black, mixed race, brown person could get it, you'd more have polycystic ovaries or fibroids, and that was it. So then from there, I saw 3 more GPs until I got referred.
And being disbelieved is so common.
Yeah.
With endo, I think we met at the Below the Belt premiere, and that film really highlighted that kind of struggle to be like, I'm in pain, and it's really hard to quantify pain, right? It's like how there are pain scales, but it's subjective. So you're trying to go to your doctor and say, no, it's like really bad. Like I can't go to work, I can't do this, and people are dismissed. It's like, well, it's a period. Periods are painful. Go on, it's part of being a woman. And then, for Black women, we know that is even worse, like that is that the being disbelieved, the being dismissed, like that is, and like that story of your mum versus you, and then almost like racially profiled, like, oh no, well, Black women are more likely to get fibroids, so that's what it'll be.
That's probably what it is. Yeah,
it's not helpful. Like that's not.
No, I went and got another opinion.
But how much work you are doing to get that support. And I think it's also interesting, both of your stories, whether it's go on the pill or whether it's go and get pregnant, which is, well, it's wild that they said that, but it's like, where is okay, let's stop for a second. Let's actually give the time. Let's look at your body. Let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about exercise. It's just like, let's kind of control your cycle to control the problem rather than actually dealing with the problem. I don't know if that's what like you guys have experienced when you were like doing that.
With me, there was no have a look, there's like period trackers and
no advice.
There was no advice whatsoever. It was just more like, this is what it is and that's it. Take this medication and that's it, and just make sure you take it how many days before your period, because it helps, blah, blah, blah. So you're taking this medication. I was like, this is not doing anything for my body. And then it was the whole thing of losing weight. But if I've got PCOS and fibroids and endo, which the fibroids and endo later was diagnosed with that fluctuates your hormones and it fluctuates your weight. And with PCOS as well, there is weight gain. So, it's if they knew I had PCOS and you knew that's one of the symptoms, then would you not tell me this is how you can manage it, and telling me, instead of saying to me, lose the weight, and that will then help your periods.
But I think that's one of the problems when it comes to women's health, is that the easiest path is to medicalize us, and the harder part, which actually is where so much of what Lenise's work is around, is actually educating us about how hormones can really impact our whole body health. And when we talk about health, it's not just the hormones, right? It's nutrition, it's mental health. Like we talk a lot about that. And that's what I think is so not present in medicine today, is really kind of talking about the health, wellness, mental health. We are all of that in one. It's holistic. You have to look at the whole picture. And I think the one thing that probably ties all you guys' stories together and our experiences too was actually tuning into that, right? Is saying, okay, I don't want to have but what is it? What else can I be doing in kind of my overall lifestyle to really kind of do? Because medicine can sometimes really just make you disconnected, right? Like you do kind of not understand what's going on.
A lot of the time, I think, obviously there is an element of the NHS being stretched, and it's like how far can these resources stretch? But it's bringing it into mainstream conversations and making sure that everyone is aware of the holistic approach that you can have to your own health, because doctors, GPs, the medical industry in general are trained to treat symptoms, not the causes, and you really have to go above and beyond to research and get second opinions and look into nutrition and naturopathic medicine to give your body the best chance possible. And if we are accepting that the NHS is stretched to the point where this isn't going to be something that they offer as a standard, then we need to be having more conversations like this, so people can at least do their research and know where they can find resources, free or more one-to-one paid care, where we can get the answers that we need.
And I think actually forums like this are really powerful, because someone might be listening, or one of you in the audience might be thinking, well, where do I start? Because a lot of this is you're not getting the support from your GPs. You feel like the onus is on you, which is completely unfair. And you think, well, where do I start? And I think there's power in these conversations, power in taking small steps to be able to advocate for yourself. Like I find it so powerful that you were able to just say, I'm just going to go get a second opinion, because that's quite flooring to just get a third diagnosis out of the blue. Do you actually have fibroids? Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, you do. Okay.
Yeah, so I've
Yeah.
got, I'll tell you guys now,
Yeah.
adenomyosis, fibroids, endometriosis, and polycystic ovaries. And I just had surgery in July.
You have all four.
I have all.
Oh my.
Wow.
Well, I applaud you.
Yeah.
do.
And I know you've
Incredible.
Yes, I might look a bit awkward because,
you're flaring out.
yeah, I'm flaring up in pain on the left side.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
being
being
here.
here.
But we have to do these talks and try and make the effort.
And that's what I was going to
You
say.
know,
It's like
you
the
don't know who it's
community,
gonna help.
the community that you set up, and you're kind of bringing people together to have these conversations. Like that's what's so powerful. Is to we need to create safe spaces for people to really go there and talk about their experience and share resources and share advice and that sort of thing. But do you feel like having that community has also helped you feel like less alone in going through all of that? Because that can be really isolating.
Oh yeah, like I said earlier, you know, like when I just kept it to myself and being told I have all these conditions, and it's just like I'm going my every day, going to college, you know, going into work, you know, and you're just like in your own little world, and it plays on your mind. But then me researching and having a look and seeing what is out there, trying to find information, you know, and there were groups and everything and charities. I was like, okay, cool, I can contact these different charities and see. But then for me as well, I didn't really see anyone other than in America, that anyone that looks like me, that I can relate to, you know, that goes through what I'm going through, not just with my health, but every day as well. So, you know, I started up like my social media. I got a bit of stick for it, because it's like, why are you talking about your periods? Well, if I talk about it, someone else will talk about it, and you never know who it can help. You know, I talk about it with my niece.
Yeah.
So good. You know, and you have to start doing that.
100%.
You know, you talk to one person, as I said, and it opens it up.
Yeah, exactly. And you give people permission to not be embarrassed, because I'm sure everyone here can agree. Like, I don't want like our children in like 20 years time to be sat here having the same conversation about how they were embarrassed to talk about their period at school. It's like, if you have to go home because you've got period pain, then you're allowed to go to the school doctor and say, I have period pain and I need to go home. You don't have to be like, oh, actually, I've got a migraine, which I'm sure we've all done at times, because you're told that you won't be believed, or it's embarrassed, or you shouldn't complain about it. And I think we need to, like I said, everyone who's having these conversations is going to help push the dial so that people are not feeling isolated like that and not feeling ashamed as much. Lini, so I really do want to talk to you about how to have a better period, because you literally wrote the book on it, as I said earlier. So it's a fantastic book. It's an extension of your amazing social media and your practice. And I've worked with you, you know, you're absolutely wonderful. So can you talk about, you know, what are the things that we can do holistically to support our menstrual health, you know, whether we are dealing with regular cycles or painful periods and PMS?
Yeah, so when I talk about this, I always say that you have to start with the basics and really look at what you can do every day, because this shouldn't feel overwhelming. It should feel really easy. It should feel like an extension of what you're already doing in your life. So starting with nutrition. So we're eating 3 meals a day, ideally, and that over 7 days a week. That's 21 different opportunities to add in foods that will benefit your menstrual health. So what I always say is start small, start simple. So look at what you're having at breakfast. You know, what can you do? What can you add in that will help support your menstrual health? So what protein, for example, I'm not saying have lots of protein powder, but like protein is really important for menstrual health. Healthy fats, really important, because that's how we make healthy fats are how we make hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So if you're having, so we're in winter, it was raining when I came in here. So porridge sounds really good for breakfast. I've turned into a Brit, apparently.
Not oatmeal.
Yeah. So if you're having porridge, can you throw a handful of seeds on that bowl of porridge? could you throw on a tablespoon of nut butter, maybe chop up some walnuts or maybe some cashews. And that takes that bowl of porridge from something that's really warming and nice to something that really kind of does a bit more for your menstrual and your hormone health. So it's really about taking it away from you have to lose weight, those sorts of conversations, which, you know, are so common in this world, to what can you add in to your meals to give them a little bit more, to kind of go the extra mile. And I think that's a really good practice that will take you through your menstruating years, but and beyond. So this is really important for menopausal women as well. And then you're looking at supplements. So we're always looking for a quick fix. I know, like always get told, what are your top three? Get asked, what are your top three supplements? And you know, everyone is different, but supplements can be a really nice cherry on the cake for a wider holistic plan. So we're at Holland and Barrett. There are so lots of beautiful supplements that you can get here that are really helpful. Magnesium is a beautiful supplement that I always recommend. That is so helpful. 75% of us are deficient in magnesium. It's so powerful for reducing period pain, so powerful for managing blood sugar levels, so endometriosis, PCOS. It's so helpful for managing mental health. So anxiety is a very common with many menstrual health conditions. Magnesium. It's not a cure-all, but it's so helpful to give you that little bit extra. Then we look at sleep. So sleep is the foundation of our health, but many of us, we kind of skimp on it. It's like, only got 5 hours of sleep and, you know, I can do everything. But no, our body really does keep the score. Like, that's a very powerful book. But your body, that will catch up with you, and you can't catch up on sleep. Your body, it doesn't work like that. So what are you doing to get really great quality sleep every single night? How are you really making this kind of a cornerstone of your health plan? And then finally, movement. So how are you moving your body? And I'm not saying go to the gym every day and start to, you know, lift loads of weight. It's more like that kind of natural movement that we do. So it's like, can you walk to the tram instead of driving there? Can you get off the tram one stop early? Can you get off the tube one stop early? Can you walk? You know, just walk a little bit more. That natural movement is so powerful. So those 5 areas, and stress management as well, is so powerful. Those 5 areas are a really great starting point for really building habits that will help you have a better period, but also beyond into your menopausal and postmenopausal years.
I know that we're going to take a couple of questions before we end, but I just wanted to ask, like, Lara and Nat, you know, could you, with everything Lisa spoke about, like, are there things that have helped you give kind of like real life experience of, like, with nutrition or with kind of stress management and sleep and exercise? Lara, I know you, because you were really into nutrition, weren't you? And you kind of
just nodding my head. As well. Movement, definitely. I mean, I had like really bad skin as well, and so it was looking at things like anti-inflammatories, cutting out sugar, not having caffeine, not having gluten, all the great things. But I think I had to go hard on all of that to start to see the effects. And nuts, seeds, all that good stuff, avocados, high fatty foods, magnesium. I was like 800 milligrams twice a day is what I have. And it's good for sleep as well.
Yeah.
Energy levels, women's hormonal balance supplements. So all that good stuff. I've lost my train of thought, but I was going to say something as well. But yeah, I think it's just important to listen to your body, isn't it? And to understand what it is that you need, what movement feels good. Yeah. So.
So for me, it's I used to PT. I only just finished personal training, beginning of this year, and I learned how to train for my body with like these conditions, as well as eat for my body. So knowing, you know, when I'm having something to eat, how my body then reacts and has a flare. So it's like, okay, I know that I can't eat red peppers because I know I'm going to have a flare. I know I can't train over 30 to 40 minutes because I know I'm then going to have a flare and have pains. You know, I started using natural oils, natural creams. I make my own hair oil. If you can see the picture, I shaved off all my hair, but I use my own. Everything I went really like natural with a lot of stuff. Not saying that you can't take medication if that does help you, then do so. But I was doing the both, but then now more down the natural route. I went old school where I'd be boiling some sorrel and some ginger and cinnamon and all of that kind of stuff and drinking that at like in the mornings. I have hibiscus. I have like a shot of hibiscus near enough every day because you know that helps with your blood flow. And
you have turmeric lattes.
Turmeric, yeah, I eat the ginger, like have that as well because that helps as an anti-inflammatory. You know, nutmeg, all of that kind of stuff. I went like,
Have you found it's helped?
Yeah,
the pain
it did.
Yeah,
it did really help. But then obviously you have your days where
No matter what you try, it just doesn't.
you have your days where you might have a bit of chocolate or you might have a bit of something.
You have to be able to enjoy it, don't you? You have to be able to enjoy life, and I think it's just everything in moderation.
Yeah, as long as you have to learn your body, and you got to know what works for your body, down to medication and down to what you're eating, movement-wise, exercise. You know what works for you. You can take advice from everybody, but know what works for you.
I was just going to say on that. I recently had an early pregnancy scan for my daughter, who I recently, 9 months ago, had a miscarriage before her, and they checked my ovaries, and it was the first time I had a scan in like 15 years, and there wasn't one cyst on my ovary. So in the space of 15 years of managing it naturally and eating the right things and, you know, having the movement that I needed, and apparently you can grow out of it. But I think through healing my body naturally and managing things without pumping hormones and sugars and all that kind of stuff, they disappeared.
So
like, how does that
can
work?
I speak to that?
Yeah, please.
So basically, what I see a lot is women getting diagnosed with PCOS simply based on an ultrasound. And that's not a true way of diagnosing.
You have to have the 3 symptoms, right?
Not
Hormone
necessarily.
imbalance, hirsutism.
Yes,
because I had all of that.
But the best way to get a PCOS diagnosis is through having blood work done.
Okay.
And then you understand.
You mean like tests?
Yeah, having your blood taken. Then you understand what's going on with your blood sugar levels, what's going on with your hormones. So like your estrogen, your testosterone levels, all of the male hormones. And then you're looking at cholesterol. You're looking at stress hormones as well. And that will actually tell you not only if you have PCOS, but also help you understand the type of PCOS you have, because there are 4 different types. And I actually find it really troubling that you had the scan when you were a teenager.
And the blood tests.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did do that, yeah.
But then you were put on the pills straight away.
Yeah, they didn't look into anything else.
Yeah, because when you're a teenager, your periods and your menstrual cycles and your hormones are still trying to settle and find a rhythm. So adding those synthetic hormones into the mix, it just doesn't
give that now, but it doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
And you can have PCO without the syndrome.
Yes.
And so I think it's doing those deeper tests.
Yes.
And I think I just had a high testosterone. That's all they looked at. They didn't look at all the other bits that I think if you were really looking into the nutritional elements of cholesterol and stuff, maybe markers would have come up that they hadn't looked into.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have polycystic ovaries without having PCOS. You can have PCOS without having polycystic ovaries, and then you can have ovarian cysts without having PCOS. I hope that makes sense.
That actually, I was going to ask, someone had actually written in with a question about, my daughter has irregular and painful periods. Our doctor suggested hormonal contraception to help the symptoms. and kind of she's only 15, what was your advice? And I think actually you just really covered that.
Yeah, just
Well, as we said, it's entirely up to them,
of course,
and what
More
they feel.
tests,
But
maybe.
more tests, second opinion.
Yeah.
I always
Mhm.
highlight and say that always get a second opinion. But for me, with my experience of what I went through, I wouldn't go on it and suggest it. But it's what
it's individual, but I think it's worth questioning and worth just taking a minute and not just taking it as the first option.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Would you say that?
I completely agree. I think we have to remember that the brain is still developing.
Mhm.
It develops until the early 20s. And so when you're throwing in those synthetic hormones into the mix, you're not allowing the brain to build the connection between, the brain and the thyroid, the brain and the ovaries, and for the body to then learn what is the right level of hormones that it actually needs to produce. And so getting a second opinion is really powerful, but also really having a look at nutrition, movement, supplements, because it's not woo, as I've heard some people say. There's a lot of evidence. Everything that you've said there's evidence and research
because
behind it.
I also feel, sorry to interrupt you, is that we should be getting our hormone levels checked before getting given anything, because you don't know if you're actually, again, giving people the wrong hormone.
So
But
yeah.
sweets. I was on 3 different types of pills because none of them were agreeing with me, and they didn't once look into my hormones after the initial diagnosis. And you're right, everyone, because they have different levels of progesterone and estrogen, and
I think it's kind of like they just treat everyone that comes in saying they got a bad period, the same, and it's like, I call it the script. They just follow the script, and this is what we have to do. If that doesn't work, the next thing is this. Instead of looking at people individually.
100%.
Well, and I think that to add to that, it's, I mean, even if the choice is to go on the pill, that's fine. But I think all the things that we've talked about around lifestyle it'll only support her more. So it's not like doing that will actually make anything worse. Well, it's a broad statement, but it's about supporting it even more, even if she decides to take that route. Don't stop then looking at a lot of the things that Denise has talked about. Like, that should also still be part of the picture.
Amazing. So we have to wrap up in a minute, but if I could get a one sentence, if possible, from each of you, if anyone is listening to this or watching this and thinking, I'm just struggling with my menstrual health, what's kind of one little piece of advice that they could maybe do today or take some action?
Believe in your pain, believe in your irregularity, believe that what you're going through needs to be heard. And hopefully through these conversations, we've sent the message of advocate for yourself. Don't just say it's fine and I'll put up with it. We should stop putting up with things that really bothers us.
Yeah.
Everything that Lena said, and to add on, listen to your body. So your body is giving you signals. There's a rhythm, and when we kind of back away from that and we just get into this kind of very 24-hour cycle, we kind of forget, and we miss the opportunity to tune into the rhythms and benefit from them.
Yeah, I'd say find a community that you can speak to about your symptoms, and from both of us, find a community. There's never a one-size-fits-all answer, and you might see a doctor who says this is what you need to do, but if you go to a community and you hear, like, there's a power in sharing stories and understanding like what the different symptoms are and what the different solutions might be.
I would say track. I take pictures. I take that to my GP and show them. I take pictures. I take videos. I track. I write everything down. Have your own little personal diary of pains before, because remember, it's not just that week or those 3 days that you're on your period. It's the whole cycle. So track everything: how it feels, how your skin is, how you've been, like your sleep, like what you were saying. Also have conversations in your family as well, because quite a lot of these symptoms and conditions can be genetic as well. So please, it can be difficult, especially when you're young. It can be difficult also when you've been raised to not talk, keep your business, as we've been told before. but have these conversations, because you don't know within your family or a family friend you can help.
100%.
100%.
Guys, can we give a round of applause to our panelists? Thank you so much. That was amazing. And just a reminder, so we're here all day having conversations. We've got 20% off at Blow. We've got 20% off the diagnostic blood test that Holland Barrett offer. And we've also got a bunch of other things in Digital Good About, including 25% off parlor courses, which Lenise does. So for PCOS and endo and a bunch of other things. So you can check all of that out online. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you first for your patience. We have been running a little bit behind schedule. Blame the rain, rail strikes. But thank you so much for being here today. And my name is Lena. I'm the CEO of Parla. We've just become a Holland & Barrett company. And this is the first of what I hope is many conversations that we'll be having around women's health. And kind of one big thing that we set out to do is really making women's health conversations something a lot more normalized. So much of women's health is very taboo. And we started the day talking about periods, and now we're going to be talking about fertility. And we as women, we're 51% of the population, so these conversations need to be normalized. We really need to empower everybody to advocate for themselves and understand what they're going through. And this panel specifically is very close to my heart because it is about a very difficult fertility journey, which is something that I've gone through. And we have amazing people here to answer questions and share their experiences. So do tune in. There are a few more other panels during the day, but I'll hand over now to Connie to make an introduction. But thank you so much for your patience, and hopefully we'll answer the questions that you have.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, fertility and pregnancy loss and infertility are, like as Lena said, they're kind of where Parla was born from. And that's been a few years now, but we're still really trying to stop making these topics taboo and things that people are uncomfortable speaking about. They're sensitive topics, yes, but there are things that we need to talk about. 1 in 7 couples are going to be struggling with infertility of some kind. 1 in 5 pregnancies are going to end in loss, sadly. And if we're all isolated and embarrassed or afraid to kind of talk about these things, then it means that not only are we dealing with something really hard, but then we're not getting the emotional support and then to kind of move through that. As Lena said, I know you're going to talk a little bit about your experience, but we've got some amazing panelists here who not only have been through tough fertility journeys, but have also taken that pain, I guess, and helping other people in various different ways, which we're so grateful for. And yeah, we're really grateful to have you here today. So do you want to give a little bit of an introduction before we get into questions?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Julia Bueno, and I'm a psychotherapist and counsellor. I have a specialist interest in working with women and couples and supporting them through infertility and pregnancy loss. And that professional path really sprung from my own personal experience. My first pregnancy over 20 years ago now ended in a very late miscarriage of twin girls in my 22nd week. I went on to have 5 more pregnancies, and I have 2 living children now. So I was very much fueled to support others because I, like women still today and couples still today, felt very isolated and lonely and confused and angry. So I have been practicing clinically, and I've done some support work along the way with a charity called the Miscarriage Association. And a few years ago, I put a lot of thoughts into a book in an effort, like Lena says, to normalise conversations and to hopefully can educate people more about it. Just hand over.
Hi, so my name is Natalie Silverman. I have 1 son through fertility treatment who is 7. And once I was pregnant, I launched the Fertility podcast because at the time, podcasts weren't what they are now. And there wasn't really anybody talking about this topic, and my background is in broadcasting. So I've spent the last nearly 8 years now speaking with experts and sharing lots of people's stories to help break the taboo that we are talking about. And I've kind of become a patient advocate doing all sorts of kind of speaking in this space. And in the last 2 years have founded a new company with Becky, who you'll hear more about in a moment, called Fertility Matters at Work, which is supporting organisations to understand the issues that people go through and how they can support them better as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Becky Kearns. So I also am a patient advocate. I was 27 when I was diagnosed with early menopause, so you'll see me later on the menopause panel as well. I've got a foot in both camps. But that was a huge shock at the time. And I was suddenly told that if I wanted to have children, I needed to go through IVF and I needed to do it straight away. And that was the start of my fertility journey, which lasted 2 years. I went through 5 cycles of IVF, sadly had a miscarriage on the first round before we had to make a decision. And we ultimately decided to go down the route of egg donation. And I now have 3 amazing girls, all thanks to egg donation. And I realised once I'd had them that no one was really talking about this, in particular the difficulties when you're going through fertility treatment itself, but also the having to make the decision to use an egg donor as well. And so I set up my blog, Defining Mum, back in 2018, which has only grown since then. I now have a support platform called Paths to Parenthood to help people who are having to make that decision and also parenting after using a donor. And then also have co-founded Fertility Matters at Work. So that's using my HR hat. My previous role was in HR, and we're now trying to talk to organisations to make sure that people who are going through this are supported in the workplace as well.
I mean, 3 kind of businesses and 3 girls, like you're a superwoman. So I wanted to kind of start with Julia, talking about the complex emotions, because as we've kind of said, everyone, we've kind of said it's navigating, a tough fertility journey, but ultimately that can take so many different shapes and so many different emotions. You lead our pregnancy after loss and grief after loss programs with Parla. And I just kind of love that at the start, you always try and help people identify the emotions that you're actually going through. It's complex, like it's confusing. So what are the kind of the emotions that you commonly see, I guess? So, everyone's different, but.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, everybody is different, but we come together because quite often stories resonate and there are themes that we share. And I suppose the one thing I should say before kind of identifying them is that they tend to be, you said complex, yes, it's a complicated mix. There's a lot going on at the same time. Yeah. And I think that's really common, that you can cycle through feelings in an hour, in a day, in a week. And it's a bit of a cliche metaphor, but it is often described as a roller coaster. So, and nor is it kind of linear, you don't move through stages, but we've touched on it already. A lot of us have come to this work with a strong sense of needing connection because of the loneliness, because it's such a disenfranchised grief and experience, and because, as we said, it's not normalised, not talked about. A really common experience is to feel incredibly isolated with your feelings. That's sort of often the kind of top layer, and then judging about it and self-criticism is a big thing we can come back to, but sort of beneath those layers of I'm doing this alone and is this right or is this wrong? One of the most, I think, complicated feelings that, or complicated experiences for the outside world to understand is that the nature of the grief is so private. It's not something that it lives in our minds. That when we want to, it begins when we try to conceive. There's a baby in our mind, right? We want to have a baby. It's not just when we see the line on the test. It begins in trying to conceive. And if we, that can inhabit in our minds for weeks and months, for a very long time, and it can become a very detailed story. A lot of us imagine what school we're going to send our kid to, and what we're going to name them, what they're going to look like. When we lose that, and maybe we don't even get pregnant, or at the very beginning of a pregnancy, from the outside world, it's like, what was that? Nothing there. But it's huge and profound in our minds and our hearts. Taking my mic, sorry. So there's that complicated grief, a kind of future-facing grief that is invisible, and the yearning and the missing for that. But also alongside that, what's really common, and I think others will pick up on this, is it's really common and usual to feel angry. And I said that was in my introduction. I was really angry at not being understood. I was really angry that it happened to me. I was really angry that other people wasn't being cared for correctly. Something that isn't talked about because we think it's wrong and not normal is to feel really envious of other people who get it, get pregnant falling off the log, or they didn't want the pregnancy, the stuff that is really provocative and obviously difficult to handle. But that's just a few. I could talk for the whole hour about the things, but you're on it because it's complicated and it can be a lot.
Does that resonate with you guys from what your experience?
I was nodding along. I think I'd always wanted to be a mum, and so I just from being a young girl playing with my dolls, I'd always imagined that I'd play mummy, and so to suddenly find out that that might not happen, it completely transforms what your future might look like. And it's also what society expects of you as well, and where all the questions come from. So when are you having children? And also what my parents had wanted. I felt like I was holding a grief not just for myself, but for my whole family as well. And I think everything that you were just saying there, I was just thinking, I remember it so well. And it's so all consuming as well. I think it takes up every moment. You wake up in the morning, you think, it hits you, and then you've got to get through the day, and often seeing triggers, people with pregnancy announcements, bumps, do you want to come to the baby shower? And you want to be happy for them because you are happy for them, but also you're so sad for yourself as well. And it can be a really complex, you feel guilty for feeling sad about someone else's happy news.
I think as well, the idea that you're talking about the anger, but the unfairness of it. There's a lot of like, why me? And whilst my personal experience is that we had successful treatment first time, we went through a whole different kind of emotional mix because it was a male issue. And so the impact that had on our relationship, my husband and I, was really difficult in that it's not spoken about with men. You know, at the time I'm talking about nearly 8 years ago, it was starting to become, I had a couple of friends that had been through it that I could go to. I wasn't looking online, and you know, now there's amazing support online, and we're all doing the kind of work that we're doing, and it's much more talking the fact that we're here, you know, it's just incredible that we're talking about this in such an open space. But I think that real unfairness is something that, like, why me? Like, what did I do? And I think that's all part of the accepting of this kind of situation that you're in, and then working your way through by trying to talk to people and understand your emotions and ride it out, because it doesn't end quickly, the experience, I think.
And I'll add to that. I think there's also a kind of, we tend to, as a society, not put enough emphasis or give enough space to the emotion, and to actually how that can really affect our daily lives. So to miscarry and then be expected to be at work two weeks later, or not having any leave, right? So I think those are things that we as a society have not really addressed. There's a lot there, I think, for support when you do have a baby, but I think there isn't enough support for when you're struggling to have a baby, or then if you do have loss. And I think that's part of, we need to start making more space for that, to just really realizing that this is both a physical but also a very emotional journey that really can affect every single day of our lives.
Yeah, I think, we talk about this a lot, that, and I must say, as women, but that's not necessarily just as women, but I feel like when you're like, okay, I want to have a baby, and something goes wrong, whether it's a loss or whether it's some like sperm test results, you're going to like do an action. We're like, okay, throwing things around, but you go into, okay, well, what next? Okay, we're moving forward. Okay, what's the solution to this problem? What can I do? And then sometimes the emotion can all hit you at once because you haven't given yourself the space. Like, society might not give you the space, but I don't think we necessarily even give ourselves the space sometimes to be with our feelings.
Yeah.
And I know that with Paula, we talk about that a lot. I know that self-care and giving yourself the space was a really big part of your healing journey when you lost your pregnancies. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did?
So I had 2 pregnancy losses. One with stillbirth later in the pregnancy, and then the first one was earlier. And I think I echo everything that you've said. It's just the hardest thing was just really feeling very, very isolated. And I come from a culture that you just don't talk about periods. You don't talk about losses. Like, my mom never talked to me about my periods. I just bled, and I had no idea what that was. And when I told her, she just gave me a pat. I mean, I love my mom, and I had my losses, and we didn't really talk about it in my family. So I was stripped away from that support system. And even when I did speak to my families, it would be like, oh, you'll know what to do next time. So it was this kind of immediate blame that I had done something wrong with the pregnancy, and that's why it didn't work out. And I know that a lot came from a very loving place, and I love my family, but I think those are some of the things that we really kind of misunderstand, and the impact that it can have. So a lot of the things that then helped me was actually connecting with people with the same shared experience. So some of the people who actually most helped me, I've never met. I literally have never met, but I've read their blogs, or I've connected with them online. And it was that moment of, oh my gosh, like, actually, yeah, it's 1 in 4 pregnancies, or 1 in 7 couples will struggle with this. And suddenly it's this little bubble, which actually it's not little. You just realize, oh my gosh, it affects so many women. And that's why I think these conversations are really important, because it will affect a lot of us, and especially for women who are trying for more than one child. Like, chances are you're going to probably miscarry, not 1 in 4. It is going to affect you. So it was kind of giving myself that space to set some boundaries, and actually then start looking for things that could work for me, because obviously my immediate support system didn't work. And it was through the shared stories that I found that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I feel like Parla is an extension of that, we're keeping.
Yeah, and that's why we started Parla, and Parla is talking, the word parler. And it was about that. It was kind of, let's talk about these things. Let's have those conversations, make it more open.
And let's talk, which is the Holland
The Holland Barrett, yeah.
So it's all coming together.
Yeah.
And Becky, I read, I can't remember if it's a blog or an Instagram post of yours, but it was a really powerful post about the complex grief of accepting that you might have children, but they're not only genetically linked to you.
Yeah.
And I think, Julia talks a lot about the different kinds of grief, and there's no hierarchy. And I wondered how did you kind of work through that? Like, were there any practices or support networks that you found that helped you kind of go through that emotions?
I think at the time I didn't even really realize I was grieving. So this was sort of 7 years ago now, and these conversations weren't being had. And so I very much just went through the motions, and like I say, I was a doer, do.
Yeah.
What can I do next? How can I get there? And I actually found the waiting in between the hardest point, where I wasn't working towards having a baby. And it was only after I'd had my girls that I was listening to a podcast, actually, and a therapist was talking. It was actually one of Natalie's fertility podcasts, and a therapist was talking about how you have to grieve the loss of genetics, and it was grief. And I suddenly felt validated. I just burst into tears. I was driving the car, my daughter in the back, and I realized that I'd been grieving, but because I'd not physically lost anything, it didn't feel real. And then I started to think about it more, and I started to write my blog, and I really started to connect with my feelings, and I started speaking out and saying, this is how it feels. And there's so many triggers and feelings of grief that still stay with me now, around like family resemblances, for example. And like, my grandma just made the comment just the other week, and I posted about this, where she said, oh, doesn't she look like our Becky? And she doesn't, because we're not genetically related, but she shares my smile, and she shares my mannerisms. And so what I've come to learn, and this is where the name Defining Mum came from, that there's so much more to being a mum, and it's all about grieving the loss of that dream, because that dream was always, I always dreamt I'd have a little mini-me. I'm so much like my mum, but it was then redefining what that dream could be. And the way I term it is I began to focus less on what I was losing and more on what I would be gaining through this gift that someone was giving me. And I always get really emotional when I talk about the girls now, because I wouldn't change any of it for the world, because I wouldn't have them. And so I think it's really important to validate your grief and to recognize it. And that's why I set up my community and my support platform, so that people can talk about these things. And we talk about the fears that we have around this, around, will I feel like the real mum, and will I bond with my baby if we don't share genetics? And all of these things are really real. And I remember when I was pregnant, I was really anxious about meeting this baby that I wasn't genetically related to yet. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it, and almost had to pretend as though everything was fine, like a regular pregnancy in that way. And I'm so passionate about talking and connecting, because when you speak about something, it becomes smaller and it's shared. And that's why I love the work that you're doing, because it just makes such a difference.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned Natalie's podcast, and like, that's just a great example of, again, like another place that we're having conversations that we weren't before. Natalie, I know you and I have talked a lot about mental health, and I think as this touches on everything we just talked about, is the mental health impact of a fertility journey, whether it includes loss or IVF. I know you talked about that a lot on your podcast. Is that something that you kind of experience yourself through your journey, and is it something that you're really passionate about raising awareness of? That, like you said, it's not just physical, it is mental as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that we talked about, the validation of your feelings, I think, until you allow that to be, it's okay if you're angry, it's okay if you're sad, it's okay if you feel guilty, it's okay whilst we want to help you kind of work through the different emotions and understand what they're saying to you. And I think one of the things that the podcast, I never imagined, having started the podcast, that 7 years down the line there would still be things to talk about, but the vastness of this conversation has meant that there has been. And I think just having that commonality, when you can find something, you can hear someone that might be talking about something that relates, like Becky experienced, and that's kind of a lot of the feedback that meant that I carried on talking about it. Somebody was saying, I never had anybody that I thought had been through what I've been through. And it's really helped others, I think, realize that A, they're not alone, B, where they can go to find a bit more support. But from the mental health point of view, I think one of the things about a fertility journey is that it can keep catching you off guard. And we've talked about little things that might trigger you along the way. I mean, our experience was that we chose to not have further treatment. And so we went through the decision of donating our frozen embryos to science. And that was something that I personally sat with for like 18 months. I had therapy. I mean, I'm a big advocate of therapy and getting support. And I think it's something that I'm sure Julia will talk about more. I think there's no rush with these decisions that you have to make, because they are, the fact that you have to go through fertility treatment to have your family in itself is huge. So any other kind of step along the way needs to be done with guidance and support. And so that's why I'm always keen to talk about the mental health conversation. And I mentioned the male element of my experience, ensuring that men are talking about it, and people in general, whatever their background is, however they identify, they'll be affected mentally by this, be it they're in a same-sex relationship and they might not be out amongst their family and they're trying to address what parenthood looks like. Men are so reluctant to talk about it, and it's something that, you know, I've been really keen from the start, and now there's so many more conversations with men, which is great, but it's not your average conversation that a bloke's going to have in the pub if he's you know.
And we're all sat here now, 5 women, which is great, but we need to get blokes doing this sort of stuff as well.
And there is a change, and there is more acceptance, and there is more support available, and people are, I think, standing up and saying, okay, I'm not ashamed, because we've done, you know, the shame is huge. And I think when we talk about mental health and fertility, and when we talk about mental health in any guise, the fact that this part of people's life, this life stage, you can't really talk about mental health without factoring this in, which is what we try to do in the workplace, because they're so interlinked.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You mentioned shame there, and Julia's really big on the self-critic, which I think is another classic that I'm sure, you know, we all recognise when you're kind of going through that. How, when you're working with your clients, Julia, how can we sort of quieten that voice down that's saying it's your fault, or you did something wrong, or you should have done this, or, you know, you shouldn't have gone to that exercise class, maybe that wouldn't have caused the miscarriage, or you shouldn't have, you know, drunk that wine last year, maybe that knowing you'd be getting pregnant, you know, all that sort of stuff, which I think is so common.
I'm distracted by my own thought. Can I go rogue? Can I go back to that, Christy?
Yes.
I just want to add on about the mental health impact of things, because one thing that was buzzing around my head is that again might tie in with everything, that all the conversations you're having today, and especially the one before, which I'm really gutted I missed about periods because the rain got me. But in terms of course, fertility treatment is a visceral bodily thing. You have to inject yourself and have scans and everything. But pregnancy loss can be, it happens in a woman's body, and it's also a physical, visceral, very shocking, can be a very, very shocking, painful, and in some cases very long, drawn out experience. And that in itself has its mental health repercussions that can stress. And I talk to a lot of women who actually might be emotionally okay about the loss, you know, as they might see it as a kind of reproductive bump in the road, but it was such a painful and visceral and terrifying experience that shock needs to be talked through. So I just didn't want to, I wanted to flag that up.
Yeah,
because
it's really important.
Mind was going to bother me.
It's a really important point. Thank you.
But and links up, I'm sure, with the whole kind of taboo and the shame of bleeding and you know, women's bodily fluids, right? I mean, men's bodily fluids are all hey, but you know, breast milk and periods, and you know, there's a sort of disgust around it, and I think that is an important part of this whole conversation today. We're normalising our emotional world, but also the visceral reality of
the
what
shame
it's like,
that we're told to feel about these things.
Reproductive woman,
or to be told that you're going to have a light period when you're going to miscarry, and it's not.
It still happens.
Yeah, it still happens. Like,
women
really
are
not
discharged from A&E with an aspirin.
Yeah.
So going back to the self-critic, and I wonder whether there's a link there too, because I think there is a bigger kind of cultural piece around women feeling that I know it is changing. It's definitely changed in the 20 years that I've had sort of skin in the game, to coin a phrase, but there is still a sense that women feel that they have to be fecund and fruitful and be a mother and produce it. There is a shame around, a child-free existence. So I think there's this sort of cultural backdrop of that, but also historically, and people might chip in here, but again, it is changing. But the whole kind of culture of obs and gynae has been very kind of women focused, and women, it's women's fault. It took a really long time. I'm sure Nathy's got a lot to say on this. It took a really long time for men, for their role to be included in the fertility, and now when Tommy's brilliantly doing lots of research on male factor for pregnancy loss, but whoa, that took a lot, and there are still people who slip through the net. I still talk to people in my practice where man hasn't had their sperm tested, which just seems so archaic still. So, and there has been this sort of legacy of women feeling, language around pregnancy loss, about kind of failed pregnancies. Or I, 20 years ago, was told that my first loss was due to my incompetence of my cervix. Now, that language is changing, but funnily enough, it had an impact on how I felt about myself. So there's, I'm sort of flagging up the kind of big features there, but there's also something about the not knowing, and we have taken a woefully long time in medical research and knowledge and funding, frankly, to invest in women's reproductive health and find out the causes of infertility and miscarriage. So still to this day, most people, certainly pregnancy loss, and there's a sort of different lens with infertility, but the vast majority of people miscarrying will not have a clue why it happened. And what do we do with not knowing? We try and make meaning, we try and make reasoning, and we try and take control. And so it's very easy. It's the least line of resistance that it must be me. And when you're situated in the context when you're told that you're not good enough for, having regular periods or conceiving easy or whatever, it's a very easy thing to do. And it must be that glass of Prosecco I had in the 6th week, or I was working too hard, or there's some very unhelpful mythologies flying around, I think, that don't support women, that are very blamey of women. Are a really common one I come up against is the whole stress thing. Just take it easy and then you'll get pregnant. So, and then of course, and this gets very in the weeds and a bit more nuanced, because as a therapist, I have the very privilege of working with people very individually and can get a deep dive into their inner world. But there can be lots of other reasons why we have a very loud self-critic. Lena mentioned her lovely mum, but cultural reasons might be that that we internalize messages from our parenting, from our school, that might increase that sort of G-force of a. If you're a self-critic anyway, if you have a very loud self-critic anyway, the chances are she'll come into action when you've lost a pregnancy or you've failed to conceive. I'll just use the language "failed to conceive." I've internalized it. So.
And when we're sort of talking about how we can be kinder to ourselves, I think, that's a real theme that I think we need to be having when we're going through a tough fertility journey, is showing yourself some kindness, not only kind of self-care and doing all that, which I think is really important, but also, just being nice to yourself,
Well, it's very up against it when you're not given permission to do that. When the messaging is crack on and try again, or you can do another round of IVF. Or you can, you can get pregnant. At least you've got that in favour. Just crack on and have another one. So there's lots of powerful messaging that doesn't give you permission to have all these feelings that we're talking about, to be vulnerable. To just doesn't go. That was really tough, and I need to mourn this loss. And I love the way, Becky, that you sort of isolated that complicatedness of a grief of something it's not entirely abstract, because our DNA is a thing, but these losses that are deemed to be kind of abstract, they're sort of the future of a family that you really thought you'd have. And as you say, maybe way back when you're a little kid. That's so difficult to grasp from the outside, but we really need to give ourselves full permission, and that is kindness.
Yeah.
to give permission.
Yeah.
I think as well, there's a whole thing about time and this idea of when you're trying to
Yeah.
conceive, everything stops because it's not like you wake up and you're pregnant from doing the deed. You know it's going to be a procedure, and if you've gone through failed treatment, then it's when the next, you talked about driving yourself mad, but when the next treatment is. And I've had lots of conversations with people talking about how everything's on hold because of the what if at that point I can't book that holiday, I can't make these plans because what if I'm pregnant. And so people then end up stopping doing the things that maybe their peer group are doing because they just don't know, and they don't know whether they're going to have to be able to go to appointments, especially if it's a travel, if there's a distance, and this whole idea of waiting to live rather than being able to live in the way. And I think it's really important to just understand the impact it has on everything. When you're seeing all your friends moving forward and you're in this, it just feels like everybody else is going to this place that you're not. And I think the impact of that as well is really significant.
Yeah.
I think it reminds me of that. There's a phrase that I heard only a few years ago, is don't let trying stop you from living. And I think about that and I thought I stopped living in all other ways of my life. I was consumed by this, and that's where we say about the workplace, we're saying you need time to grieve, you need time to get over these. But if you've going through a miscarriage, like I remember when I needed to have surgery at the end, it was a very long drawn out process, and I remember sending a message to my manager to say, I really feel like my husband and I just want to go away, can I take some annual leave? And because I'd had time off for the IVF, I felt really guilty, and I was kind of told, well, you have had this time off already, and like, could you do it in a few weeks' time? And I did. I just went back into work and put the face on for a few more weeks, and then I fell apart after that. And I think it seeps into every part of your life and your relationships. And I think that's why it's so important to find other people and to find things that you can still take joy from while you're going through this, because I lived in a very dark place at the time, and I kind of wish that support would have been around to make me see it in a different way and be able to try and have some separation between my life and
And I think also it's all parts of our life. It's personal and professional. You guys are doing some amazing work with Fertility Mess at Work, trying to get employers to understand how they can be more fertility friendly. Holland & Barrett, they're working with Parlour to give their employees better support for these things that are going on internally. And these things don't switch off when we go into the workplace, right? And if we want to be able to be the best employees and team members we can be, we need environments where people understand, and we get a bit of space where it's not taboo. You can say, this is why I need the time off, rather than trying to make something up, or I don't know, like say you go to the dentist and actually you're going for an IVF appointment. We need to be able to just have open conversations in the workplace, which is why what you guys are doing is so fantastic. And you touched on different relationships there, and I think that's a really important one to talk about. Is community is really important. We need to connect with people, but sometimes it's easier to connect with people that we don't know so well, because personal relationships can be quite tough during this time, right? Is that something you experienced?
Yeah, and I think that's something also that we don't talk enough about, is that, your relationship with your partner gets stressed. Your relationship with your immediate, the people you used to go to, that gets stressed. They might not really understand what you're going through. And it really is, it's such a sad and difficult place to be in, because it really can, something that's already makes you feel so isolated, even worse. And I think we need to, like, even sex, like, even if that's the path that you're choosing to conceive, it's all of that gets stressed. Everything becomes so mechanical, and there's just so much that gets taken away from it. And I don't think we even give space for the loss of all of that and the complexities of all of that.
I think friendship wise, like you say, that I remember when I was going through treatment, my best friend had 2 children very easily, and I felt that I couldn't talk with her. And I sent her this, looking back, what I was thinking, she ultimately thought that I had cancer, because I sent her this email to say, going through something, I can't talk to you about it, but I just need my space type thing. And she thought I was going through this, obviously I was going through a significant life-changing event, but it wasn't, we talk about it being life-limiting, it's not life-threatening. But I just didn't know how to communicate with those friends that were just easily having families, and they were sneezing and falling pregnant, and removed myself. And I think understanding, we talk about like the kindness of strangers, which is what you can find in the amazing kind of online communities, but I think also understanding how to have those conversations with your friends is also part of this, is saying, look, there is this, don't want you to ask, I'll come back when I'm ready. Almost you've got to put the boundaries up, haven't you?
And I think also the other way around, because I think sometimes, like definitely after the pregnancy losses, people didn't want to talk about it. And I think sometimes they do it actually out of a good place, because they don't want to hurt. But actually completely shutting that conversation down is not helpful. But I think that's why the idea of breaking the taboo is not just only for us, but I think it's also for how other people can relate to us. And that then becomes a smoother cycle and conversation. Yeah, because otherwise you're having to kind of make space for them. Like I kind of felt like, okay, well, I'll, don't say anything, I'll say it for both of us, and you kind of take that awkwardness away. And I think that also we need to kind of empower others to know how to deal with our experiences.
Yeah. So we've got 10 minutes left. We've actually had lots of questions. So I'm going to try and get through as many as I can. If anyone here does want to ask a question, then just pop your hand up so I know. But I'll start with a few of these. So one is, what is the panel's thoughts on fertility testing? How can we encourage people to be proactive? And look at it before it gets to the point where you're struggling to conceive, which I think
I can take that one on the chin. I think fertility testing has its place. I think one of the benefits of just at least testing earlier is just at least knowing. But what I've never wanted fertility testing to be is to also be an immediate block, because having a very low AMH does not mean you can't conceive. So I think it's do the test if you think that you will be empowered by what that test will tell you. But if that test is just going to send you to a very dark place, if things aren't the way it is, then don't do that test. Yeah. But I think we are in a time in our society that actually there is real power in technology, in data, and using that information to help inform our decisions. So if you are the type that want to engage with your health proactively, I'd say yes, test, because that will just give you a better sense of where you are. But don't let that test take you to a dark place, because we're not defined by that. And I really feel like there is, especially when it comes to fertility and to reproductive health, that our minds can really harm that. So even when you're okay, you can kind of harm yourself with that. So use it to empower yourself, but not to your detriment.
Amazing.
Can I just add on the male side as well? I think now with, like you were saying, developments in technology, there's the ability for men to kind of test at home. And there's such reluctance, I think, for men to admit there's a problem. And we know that, unfortunately, fertility issues are often kind of 50-50, that if you can convince a man to have that in the comfort of his home to find out as well, rather than going through if there's recurrent loss or failed treatment, then again it's that empowerment kind of piece.
My husband recently did a sperm test, and they're a lot more fun than a blood test, let me tell you that. Doing a sperm test at home he's all right. Julia, maybe this one would be good for you. So we lost a baby 6 months ago, and my partner is ready to go again, but I'm just not. How can I deal with that?
Well, that's a really obviously sad thing to hear. This might be stating the obvious, but it's about communication. And I talk to a lot of couples who get isolated not through willful miscommunication, but just through different grieving styles often. It is very general, but there are different grieving styles, and men tend to grieve in a certain way and women another. I grieve in a very male way, but so there might be something that going on. So conversation, I'd be curious to know, how their communication is.
Just being honest, I guess.
It's being honest and being respectful. That a common theme is that one might feel the other isn't hurting as much, and just to be more concrete, men, for example, tend to be doers. They're in their grief, they'll want to kind of raise money or fix the house, and women are much better at reaching out and making connections and speaking out. We're better at friendships. That's just true. The stats are there. So a woman can quite often think that their partner hasn't grieved the loss or isn't feeling so deeply, but that's not necessarily the case. So I don't know whether that's a helpful response.
I think it is. We've got a couple of IVF questions. I don't know, Natalie, if you'd be able to answer them from your perspective. So one I think you definitely understand is we're struggling with the idea, we think about IVF, but we're struggling with the costs and the emotional strain. Like those sorts of things are worrying us as a couple. Do you have any advice on that?
Well, I think it's something that Becky can probably talk as well, because my personal experience is we were eligible for funding, so the cost issue was taken away. I think you got to give yourself time to go through this process. We went through it. I definitely felt like it was this kind of science experiment that we were kind of giving ourselves over to science to, and it was kind of exciting, but there was a naivety in that. And I think knowing what I now know about, we were, as I said, successful first time. I think it's very different approaching it when you know stories of the success rates and the failures. So I think you've got to decide, and if it's not the right thing for you, that's okay. I think, we hear stories all the time of people that, they've been told there's issues and they don't feel comfortable going into IVF. So just because it is an option doesn't mean it has to be. And I think sitting in that uncertainty, asking support, talking it through, you can get, the saying about being a fan of therapy, I think just being really clear that this is the route, because it is invasive, it is time consuming, it is a cost. I don't know if you want to talk about the cost implications.
We initially weren't eligible for funding because my hormone levels were too high for treatment with my own eggs, but too low for treatment with donor eggs. And I kind of just fell in the middle of. And we were very fortunate that we were fortunate in a way. We had some inheritance that we could use, and that's not what it was intended for. But and we did go private. We went through 5 cycles, and I daren't even add up how much we spent over those years trying. But I think that isn't talked about enough as well, the financial strain of it. We often talk when we're doing work with Fertility Matters at work, it's a physical, it's emotional, which is huge, but there's a financial one as well. And then when you put that in the context of the workplace as well, your work is so important to you because you need to work to pay for it. So, I don't know, in terms of just validating it, it's really difficult. And
like you said, take your time and think about this.
I mean, one thing on the workplace, there are more workplaces talking about supporting financially, which is amazing, whether it's part of a benefits package or there's like a loan element, and there are companies that you can look into about kind of financial support, loans, that type of thing. So it's not if you've not got it yourself, there are options to kind of look into, and I think what's changing in the workplace is really interesting to see the support available.
I think the difficult thing with it, though, you're putting thousands into this. There's no guarantee, and that's the really difficult thing, because it almost feels like you're gambling it a bit in a way. There's odds there. Is it going to work? Is it not? And that makes it more difficult as well. Because I mean, we used to look back, and I'd be like, we need to go again. And my husband had got his very sensible hat on, going, right, well, we do need to have a look at what we've got available, and there is an end point, and that's really hard to consider when you're going through this.
And that's like a grief in itself. Like we can't afford to do this anymore. This is our last shot because, and I've heard that a lot on podcasts and stuff. This is our last shot because of X or age. Someone's asked for age, and obviously, the older you get, the kind of, I mean, people are having babies a lot older now, which is wonderful, but there is sort of an age cap on that. So we've got to wrap up. But I will just say, a massive thank you. And if there's just one little nugget of advice that you could give to someone that maybe is watching this right now or at home and is struggling right now, what would be your sort of little takeaway?
Find somebody that can that understand what you're going through, and give yourself that space to share that experience, because we need to make space for it.
I suppose it's linked. I would encourage somebody just to check out if they are treating themselves any differently from how they would treat their good friend, because there's usually a big gap.
I would echo both of these, and I think gosh, I forgot what I was going to say. There's so many different ones. I would say take your time. Don't deal with it on your own. Like seek help. Find your tribe.
Listen to your podcast.
There's hundreds and hundreds of brilliant interviews there. Your
there are.
Is amazing.
There's commonality, I think, is what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, and similar thing, Mum, just be kind to yourself, because my internal voice when I was going through this was like, pull yourself together, Becky. Like, why are you? And I didn't realise how much I was. So you are already being so strong. You might not feel strong, but you're being so strong because you're going through it. You're getting up. You're going through such a difficult time, and I think it's validating that, being kind to yourself, and just Being your own champion, I think.
Well, and keeping talking, I think it's amazing. Like we said, we're having a conversation about these tough topics on the high street in this amazing place. And thank you so much for all joining and sharing your stories and your advice. I'm sure you've helped many, many people. So we're going to be back in about 10 minutes where we're talking about pelvic floors and incontinence. But remember, we've got 20% off in Glow over the weekend, and on a whole about blood tests, and also amongst the other things in the digital goodie bag is 25% off our Parlour programs, which our pregnancy after loss and grief after loss programs are amazing. Julia is there, Lena is there, and it's a really great space to learn and connect. So please, if you've watched this and you're struggling with loss, then we'd love to see you there.
And IVF.
Oh, and IVF. And IVF, our new one for IVF is coming out as well. So brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon now. This is the third of 4 panels that we've had today. My name is Lena, and I'm the CEO of Parla. We've been recently acquired by Holland & Barrett, so now we're a Holland & Barrett company. And this is a really amazing opportunity that we've been given to bring a lot of the conversations that we're having today, which is really taboo, but actually affects so many of us, onto the high street. And the high street is really kind of like a figurative way, but it's the goal here is to really normalize these conversations, because I think so often we're suffering in silences with these conditions. We've talked about periods, we've talked about infertility, pregnancy loss, and this is all about pelvic health. And we have some amazing people here. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'll hand over to Connie, who's our moderator today. But it affects a lot of us. And this is, I hope, the first of many conversations, because what we want is for all of you to feel empowered and listened to, so that you don't have to be fighting to advocate for yourself, but that you'll be understood. So do enjoy this panel, and I'll hand over now to our lovely Connie.
Hi, everyone, and hi, everyone at home. Sorry we're running a bit late. I was in the toilet, which is ironic for the topic that we're about to talk about. I didn't want to wet myself on a pelvic floor panel. Pelvic health is really important, and let us, in a survey of 1,000 women, 1 in 6 didn't know where their pelvic floor was or what it is. So it's clearly one of those things that we need to know about, but we're still just not quite there yet. Incontinence, little bladder leaks, there are things that I think are made a joke of quite a lot when we talk about women of a certain age or new mums, and it really it's no laughing matter. It's something that can be really debilitating from a confidence standpoint. It's something that shouldn't be ignored and should be dealt with. And so we need to be starting having these conversations out in the open, breaking the taboo, breaking the shame, and getting people the support that they need. So I've got an amazing panel here today. I don't know if you all want to sort of give a little bit of an introduction to yourselves.
Shall I start?
Go for it, Fiona.
My name is Fiona Sweeney, and I work for Holland & Barrett. I'm one of the science leads in Wellness Futures, where we're building innovative digital products to help people along their health and wellness journey. But I came into digital health, particularly femtech, which is digital health for women, because I had a strong desire to scale healthcare solutions for women and make them more accessible. I was a physiotherapist by trade. I was a physiotherapist for many years, and I worked in the British Army as an army officer and England Rugby with the England women's team during their successful World Cup campaign in 2014, as well as at the Royal Ballet School, so with pre-professional dancers. So I've got a lot of experience of active women and their experiences with pelvic health issues, as well as my own, having had a couple of children.
I mean, I always wanted to work with the rugby team when I first went into physio. But my name's Jenny. I'm a pelvic health physiotherapist, and I actually worked predominantly in the NHS for 7.5 years before setting up my own business and going self-employed for therapy in March 2020, which was a little bit of a rookie time to have set up a business. But I love the area. I love pelvic health. And I specialise in treating men, women. I do a bit of acupuncture and Pilates on the side as well. But it's definitely the area for me. I was previously doing musculoskeletal physiotherapy and then did a rotation in pelvic health and just loved it. And that's where I am now.
I'm Kelly. I'm basically just a mum of 6 children, but I have suffered with stress and urge incontinence since probably the birth of my first son 22 years ago. So I started a company selling leak-proof knickers because the knickers that were on the market wasn't something that I wanted to wear. They were quite bulky and looked unattractive, so I basically designed a pair of knickers that's discreet, that women can wear to keep active and just to keep moving. That's me.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I wear her knickers. Not why actually, I'm not the one she's got on today, but I wear her knickers. I am also, I'm not going to say just a mum, I'm a mum and a grandma, and I had a birth trauma when I was 19, which you didn't address back then. So, but yeah, for menopause for me has been the thing that's really got the kind of leakage out of control. So I met Kelly recently through a thing we did on TV, and yeah, she's her knickers are amazing. But yeah, I'm keen. I've got an Instagram called the Mama Pause, which I rant about menopause and all the things that encompasses. So
amazing, thank you. And I have the pleasure to know you all, and I'm just like, that's lovely, nice chat. So, I want to start with you. Kind of, I think we're talking about incontinence and leakage, but as you said, when you're working with rugby players or ballet dancers, the pelvic floor it's doing a lot down there. It's a really busy area of our body. Can you tell us a bit about its role in the body and kind of what it does?
You're right. It's a very busy area that is often forgotten about, I think. So it's the pelvic floor relates to a group of muscles that sit at the bottom of the pelvis and support the pelvic organs, such as your bladder, your bowel, if you're female, your uterus as well. But they form part of what we all call our core, so your deeper abdominal muscles in your back, and even up to your diaphragm. And they're incredibly important in supporting you when you're urinating, when you're defecating, going for a poo, and they help with your sexual function. And as I said, they form that core part, that essential part of your overall core. Now, there's a lot spoken about, as you say, about urinary incontinence and women with weak pelvic floors, so they're not necessarily able to sort of identify where they are, or they know where they are, but their sort of brain connection isn't quite as effective as it should be. They can also suffer from overactive pelvic floors, and that's something we really did experience in athletic populations.
Oh, wow.
Something that isn't necessarily talked about as much. But having an overactive pelvic floor can also make it difficult for you to contract and, really importantly, relax your pelvic floor. It's a really important part of it too. And yeah, I think in terms of how important it is, there's also some research around that it can help by doing your pelvic floor. Exercises can help with vaginal dryness. So yeah, it's a pretty essential part of the body.
Yeah, we need to look after it.
Yeah, and it doesn't just manifest itself in things like urinary incontinence. I'm sure you've seen this. Like, it can manifest itself in hip pain, back pain, and can be really problematic.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Jenny. We've talked about incontinence, and I think Cal mentioned urge incontinence, stress incontinence, and then there's sort of full incontinence and little bladder leaks. So, can you sort of help us figure out sort of what's what when it comes to those things?
There's so many different types of incontinence that people can suffer with, and I say people because men as well. And actually, incontinence is pretty much the involuntary passing of urine or stool. And the main types of incontinence that we see is urge urinary incontinence as well as stress urinary incontinence. And stress urinary incontinence is really when pressure is applied to the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor either isn't strong enough, isn't flexible enough, it can't react in time to that change in pressure. So, for example, some people might be able to resonate with coughing, sneezing, jumping, even laughing, running, and then you suffer a bit of leaking. So that's the stress side of things. Then the urge side is then not being able to get to the toilet in time. So when you suddenly get an urge to urinate and then you're having to rush to get to the toilet. And again, this comes with little triggers. So some people might, again, be able to identify as kind of the key and lock syndrome. So you're coming home from work and then you're getting the key in the lock and you're rushing through, and then you might not be able to make it in time. Or some people also find running water as a trigger or getting into the shower as a trigger. So there's lots of different types of urinary incontinence.
And what are the causes of incontinence, primarily? I mean, I'm sure there are a bunch of reasons why you might have a weak pelvic floor or sort of trauma there, but what are the common ones that usually trigger it for people?
So the main causes for pelvic floor dysfunction would be pregnancy, so weakening of the pelvic floor during pregnancy, vaginal delivery, so a lot of pressure, a lot of pushing onto the pelvic floor as well. Natural aging, so again, coming around that perimenopausal, menopausal time, your change in hormones really affect the pelvic floor. But then also people who suffer with more the respiratory problems, so if they're coughing lots, if they suffer with constipation, so a lot of straining and pushing, and they're really the types that people don't really think about that can actually really affect the pelvic floor. You kind of think babies, pregnancy, that's your main cause, but actually there's so many other things that can affect pelvic floor dysfunction.
Yeah, I mean, I know, Kel, you and I have spoken about you had a cesarean, so maybe you're thinking, I'm not going to have an issue there, and you can, like, even if you don't have a vaginal birth, like you can still have incontinence. Kel, I mean, I've talked to you about you wetting yourself often, as we're good friends, but could you tell everyone at home your story, because I think it's really important about sort of why it became so debilitating for you, and you were like, you have to do something about it.
Yeah, I think with me it was a case of I remember very vividly the first time I completely wet myself was just after I'd given birth to my second son, which was a natural birth, and being absolutely mortified because I was in a room that there wasn't a bathroom attached, so I had to walk through dripping wee all across the hospital, and it was absolutely, it was so embarrassing. But as time went on, I've had so many different, I've done pelvic floor exercises, always tried to do those. I've seen the doctor. I've had my bladder lifted, I believe, at some stage as well, but I still do leak. But the worst thing for me was then hitting menopause and still wanting to keep active, but not enjoying playing sports anymore, because every time I was at hockey, I'd stretch for the ball and I would leak. And I kind of felt really embarrassed and alone, but I had a really nice group of women around me. And I think one day I kind of went, just wet myself again, joking about it. And someone said, oh my God, I do that as well. And actually most of the team ended up doing it because we're all middle-aged women. So we were all in the same boat. And I just kind of thought that this is not right. How long is this going to go on for? And being menopausal, it gets even worse, doesn't it? Your bladder muscles get even weaker. So yeah, that was a difficult time.
Yeah. And Samantha, how about you? I know that you're running around after your kids or your grandchildren and stuff like that, and I know that's always been something for you that you worried about.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to Kelly. In menopause, it does. You go to do something. I was saying to you, wasn't I, earlier, that I go to the park with my grandchildren, and I'm like a loon. I mean, I run around like a crazy thing with them. I'm very active, but I jumped off something. It's like, okay, and it's like, Grandma, what's wrong? And, it's not a good look.
No.
But yeah, it's talking to people like Kelly is great, because I wasn't telling anybody. Even my mum said, "You've never mentioned this before." It's like, why would I? There is I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why there's shame around it. I really don't. I was getting my nails done recently and telling the girl that was doing my nails that I'd been on this TV program about wetting myself. And you were talking about it. There's this young woman next to me, a young woman who's had 2 babies, and she turned to me and said, I've been doing this for 6 months and I don't know who to talk to. So it's not, even young women are not talking about it. So my advice was, get to your GP. Go and get some help, because it's not right that it's shameful. It's really not.
No, and I think even more so with young women, maybe the stigma is there, because I think this is wrong as well. Like, sort of, like I said, it's a bit of a joke sometimes. It's like, you're getting older.
It's an old lady thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And perception that little fat old lady.
Totally, exactly. And you don't want to feel like that even in your 50s. But also, if you're in your 20s or 30s and you've just had a child, it's like, and you maybe haven't reached the age group where people are talking about it, like at your team, and that must be so isolating as a new mum, and motherhood can be isolating anyway. So you don't need that as well. I mean, you both do speak really publicly about that. What was that like the first time that you decided to kind of
start laughing? You have to. Yeah, it was really nice. And the first time we met, we just clicked. We just got on, because my friends have always said to me, you make humour out. Humour is my go-to. So if I'm upset or worried about something, I will make a joke out of it. And I know it's not funny. It isn't funny for most people, but it's kind of like you have to use your humour to get through it. It is embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. But everyone knows now that I wet myself. Like I publicly announced it on TV. You know, my husband's so supportive. All of my kids, bless them. It could be really embarrassing for them, the fact that I'm constantly talking about my incontinence. But they're like, Mum, we're dealing with it. It's great that you're getting it out there and people are talking about it. So I've got support from everybody.
But great for boys as well.
Understand
Because that's as equally important.
Yeah, my boys are really proud. Yeah, they're really proud. They are really proud that I am out there talking about it. They do support me. So, and I always think if by me talking about it, it makes it easier for somebody else to go to their GP and talk about it, because they know it's not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. We all know that. You know, then that's great. That's a job well done, isn't it?
Yeah. I was going to say, Fiona, I think, do you think that part of the reason people aren't getting the support is because there is a stigma around it, that not only are we embarrassed to tell our friends, but we're maybe even embarrassed to acknowledge that it's going on and go and get support for it?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is really stigmatized, whatever age group you're in. You know, I think about the narrative around childbirth and, you know, what does a vaginal birth do to you and your relationship? It's quite a misogynistic narrative, and people don't want to talk about that. And then it's so personal, and not everyone has the language they need to sit in front of their GP and explain what the problem is. And then how do you know how bad it has to get to actually take that step to have that conversation? And like, I'm sure you know this. Like, who's heard of a pelvic health physio? I mean, when I did my absolutely, when I did my physio training, we didn't even talk about the pelvic floor. It was like this bit in the middle that we like missed out.
And do you, I mean, I don't have children yet, so you know, is that conversation even happening with mums? You know, I mean, like I said, pregnancy doesn't have to be, that's not necessarily always the cause, but it seems to be quite a common trigger of those problems that then can develop. Are, you know, the healthcare workers in that situation, are they talking to women about their pelvic floor during pregnancy, or is it quite focused on the baby and then afterwards they're like, oh, by the way, do a Kegel or two?
In my experience,
That's
good.
I think they do. I think midwives are kind of throwing it in, but it is very much a go do your pelvic floor and then that's it. And then a lot of people are like, well, what do I do?
There's a new NHS pilot that they're running at the moment, isn't there? They've got to set up new clinics with specialised midwives and specialised pelvic health physios.
Amazing.
But that's not countrywide. That's still they'll only be able to kind of cater for a few 100,000 women. But hopefully, if that goes well, then it will go across the UK, and that will be fantastic. So that will be support from. At the moment, I think it's just women who are given birth, pregnant women. But hopefully, they can take that across to women of all ages, menopausal women as well. So hopefully there is light. But when I gave birth, do you remember any support?
I was just given a leaflet.
A leaflet.
Yeah. And I had a severe birth trauma, and it was kind of like, you've been stitched up now, do your pelvic floor, go away. I was 19, I did not know what you were talking about. And as I was saying to Jenny, for a year afterwards, I was walking around thinking the world was literally going to fall out of my vagina. There was no discussion, but that was late 80s.
But how do you know what's normal as well? Like you have no reference point, do you? You're like, oh, this is normal.
Not.
Everyone else is going through it,
As
and
girls,
my priority is my baby.
Vaginas with each other, do we? We do.
We do.
How do we end conversation?
I'm interested with your work in the sports world, because I kind of feel, you know, I think a common theme from the conversations we've been having today about periods and then about fertility is not being connected with our bodies, not knowing what's normal, not wanting to get to know our bodies. And well, I guess maybe I'm wrong. In a sports environment, I guess you are talking about your physical body quite a lot, and so maybe you start to know what should feel right and what should feel wrong. Whereas I think your sort of average woman on the street who might, you know, be active but not an athlete is probably not understanding their body like that way.
And actually, the NICE guidelines of the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, which a lot of NHS practices are based on, do suggest that women start doing pelvic floor exercises from the age of 12.
Wow.
So actually, you know, should it be part of school PE? You know, or why isn't it part of school PE? But do PE teachers know about it? So then you unravel it. Where does the education start?
Yes, love that. Even our biology lessons, like I don't really remember being taught that much about this area.
I just laughed at the pages.
Totally. Exactly.
I think even in my degree, I think we had one seminar on pelvic floor, and that was it. And it wasn't actually until qualifying as a physio, doing rotations and learning about it that way that I was like, what is this area of physio? And I think still so many health professionals don't know about pelvic health physio, and including kind of GPs. And I think, you know, people can go to GPs and they don't necessarily know kind of what to do or where to go. And maybe necessarily, you know, the right place to go. But yeah, pelvic health physios just still aren't really out there as knowledge.
But you are one, and you
I
are,
am
you are
one.
there,
Yes, I am
and you're,
one.
and you're amazing. So can you tell us what are the things that we can be doing to support our pelvic floor? I guess maybe even before there are issues or after issues as well.
Yeah, and I think just, you know, starting with pelvic floor exercises is a really good place to start. But it's kind of understanding that it's not just about squeezing, because like Fiona said, that can actually lead to other problems, and it can actually lead to an overactive pelvic floor if we just tighten.
Yeah.
So I would always start with a good bit of breathing. So getting people to actually breathe properly into their lungs and take nice deep breaths. And then start doing pelvic floor exercises with their breathing. So actually contracting the pelvic floor fully, but then relaxing fully as well. And then we always encourage people to do the longer holds and shorter holds, because the different types of muscle fibers that you have in the muscle belly of the pelvic floor, you want to practice longer holds as well as shorter holds. And the key area to focus on is just squeezing the back passage as if you're stopping yourself passing wind, because the anus actually sits in the middle of the pelvic floor, so then you're going to get the most squeeze out of it. But always relax between each repetition.
How many people are
just
sat
me
here
that's
doing
doing
that?
And you get that squeeze. But can you relax as well?
Can I relax is a much bigger question than generally speaking.
That was funny.
As you mentioned, you and Cal, we've got celebrities in our midst. You were on Channel 5 talking about incontinence, and you tried out a few different products.
We did, yeah.
That sort of can help, I guess, kind of encourage you to do your Kegels or show you how to do it. Can you talk us through a little? I'm fascinated by some of them.
Yeah, they were interesting, weren't they? I think the shorts, we agree, we had a talk earlier. We wore these shorts which give this sort of electrical shock, you know, like a stimulation, which clench. Literally, you put them on, they're like cycling shorts. You hook yourself up and you whack up the wattage or whatever it is. And to begin with, I was like, yeah, this is fine. And then whacked it. Where? It was.
The legs literally went.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
It was like, it was not much fun, really, was it?
Yeah, and I mean, we did that for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It got a bit tiresome
it was
because
time
actually
consuming, wasn't it? Because you had to lay down to do it.
Half an hour every day.
Half an hour. And who's got, like, when you're a busy mum, who's got half an hour to just focus on?
And actually got quite painful in the end because it hurt. So that was the first one.
Then we tried the PeriFit, which is like a small instrument that you insert into your vagina, and you've got an app on your phone, so you have to squeeze. It's like Flappy Bird, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you squeeze, it's got sensors on it, and so you squeeze, and then you get the bird through the hoop.
It's literally a game.
It's a game.
Yeah.
But again, you have to lay down, because I made the mistake of inserting it. You have to lay down. I inserted it, but my phone was across the room. So I jumped up to get the phone. Honestly, the pain was unbelievable. And then my son walked in the room as well. I'm like, oh my God, it was awful. But I didn't like that either. That I suffer because of the menopause I suffered with UTIs, and that actually caused a UTI for me. You struggled with that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I out of the 3 of them at the time, I quite liked that because I thought you can, you know, pick it up, but actually as time's gone on, I haven't used it because you've got to be in a private place. Even I had it in, I was in bed and my daughter came in and she went, oh, I'm going out. And she's a girl and she thought it was weird that I had this thing inside me. And then the final thing was the active guard, the control guard, wasn't it? Guard, and that was a completely different product. That was it's inserted like a tampon. It's like a silicone sponge
thing,
which kind of opens up. Once it's in, it opens up, and the idea is it holds the bladder away from the uterus. And actually, that's for instant relief.
Instant.
You've got a heavy going day, and you're going to be doing lots of running around.
So you can leave it in for about 12 hours. So I tried it for the first time for 12 hours and literally thought, oh my God, I need to get it out. By about 8 hours, I went to work and came back like, and this needs to come out right now. But then I tried it when I played hockey, so it was like I was out of the house for 2 hours, and it was brilliant because usually when I play hockey, I have to go to the toilet several times before the match, and then at half time I have to go to the toilet, and then after the game I have to rush off the toilet. But I didn't have any of those urges to go. So it was instant gratification for me, but not a long-term fix.
I met the CEO of Control last week.
Oh, really?
And he then sent me a load of free samples, which was great. So I can then give them out to my clients. But it is a really good
But
product.
with continued use, apparently, I found this out afterwards, with continued use, it's kind of like a muscle memory thing, that by lifting it, it's actually,
And that's
so it's
the
not
point
just,
of it,
it's not just like a quick
okay.
fix for a day.
And also that was the cheapest product.
Yeah.
I mean, those shorts are like £250. I would never, I wouldn't
Also,
be able
surely
to
that
afford
got your bottom squeezing and your.
I've got to say, my bum is looking pretty
Well, some other benefits,
yeah, I was quite impressed with how tight my bottoms were.
The pelvic floor was still suffering.
But my bum looked good.
Still got myself great bum.
But that's all that
Well, I mean, I think there's so much out there, and like Tony said, it can be as simple as getting to really know that. But I think it's good to try things out and find what works for you, kind of experiment and stuff like that. And speaking of products, I've got to say, Kel, we mentioned the pants.
Yeah.
And I think you work closely with Jenny to kind of promote pelvic floor, because it's, yes, they're leak-proof underwear, which are amazing for giving confidence, but also it's not a kind of do this and not bother with it.
No, that's right. No, we know that it's common, but it's not normal. So we're there as a backup, really, for if you've got a busy day and you want to play sports. We want to keep people active. We want to keep people
So it's good
playing
for your
sports.
pelvic floor health.
It's good for your pelvic floor, and it's good for your mental health as well. So we work with Jenny really closely. Jenny does some great videos for us talking about, how you can work on and support your pelvic floor health. And we promote other products as well. We don't want to just say, like, buy these knickers and this is going to be the end of your problem. That's not how it works. We just want women to feel supported in all journeys of life, and actually having a nice pair of knickers that, if you're going out on a night out, actually you're not too worried about if you have a little leak, if you're dancing a bit too actively, and you've got that extra support. So
it's all about confidence, isn't it? I think that's the biggest thing that is clearly impacted when people are struggling with that.
Attractive, incontinence, it's embarrassing, it's debilitating, it's like it's degrading, isn't it?
It's not sexy.
It's not
Definitely
sexy
not
at all.
sexy.
But if you've got these things that can give you the confidence to just carry on and
because I can just imagine, if it's, we're sat here saying, go and see a pelvic floor health, or like Pilates might help, or this might help. But if you are that young woman, new mum, who is just sat there completely paralyzed by shame,
overwhelmed,
and actually it needs to, like, okay, well, maybe try these knickers as a starting point, and then actually go out there and like stay active and go and see someone like Jenny and stuff like that, and get back into sport. I mean, I don't know, in terms of like Holland Barrett and supplements and stuff, I don't know if you know anything about how that can help with incontinence, or
there is one new supplement that's come out on the market that's not Holland Barrett, though.
Okay, fine.
Someone else might be able to help me with the name of it, which has got some evidence for supporting urinary incontinence. Not that helpful, so I can't remember the name of it.
And that's fine. I think it's just interesting because you hear all this, kind of like the products, it's like you hear all these things, and it's like I believe that actually the exercise is the most important part, but you can do other things to support and kind of supplement that kind of growth. How are we doing for time? Let's see if we've got any questions. Okay, fab. Let me have a look. Does anyone have any questions here whilst I'm having a quick look? No? It's fine. Okay, so
no one wants to talk about weed.
Could you tell us the ladies' company that sells pants? Yes, it's Nixie Body. She's managed not to say that at all.
Sorry. Nixie Body.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, so here's some questions. So I don't know, maybe Jenny might be mainly coming at Jenny, potentially. I'm pregnant with my second child and very worried about a vaginal prolapse, which we haven't really talked about prolapses.
Okay, yes.
Can strengthening my pelvic floor help prevent that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be number one thing to start with, and it's not necessarily going to be the one thing that fixes it, because you have to look at it as kind of a whole holistic approach as well. And with something like prolapse, it's very much about pressure management. So essentially, prolapses occur from pressure down, not being supported by the pelvic floor's strength.
Right.
So it's actually about kind of managing pressure as well. So yes, doing your pelvic floor exercises, but then also being mindful of your bowel management. So making sure you're not constipated, not straining on the toilet, making sure that you're not repetitively heavy lifting, which maybe with a younger child that she already has might be challenging, but then doing techniques to help with that. So it's about getting kind of the pressure management side of things as well as doing pelvic floor exercises.
And I guess we could have just jumped in there saying, let's talk about prolapse, but some people might not know what a prolapse is. So could we maybe explain what that is?
Yeah. So you can have different types of prolapses, and it's essentially a descent of one or more of your organs coming down through the vaginal tissues. And there's different grades of prolapse. So you can get prolapses coming to into the vagina, you can get it to the vaginal entrance, or even coming out of the vaginal entrance. And you can get your bladder prolapsing, you can get your uterus prolapsing, or your rectum prolapsing. So there's lots of main different types of prolapses, and so obviously it can be a really debilitating thing for women, and that's why you have to kind of manage it more with pelvic floor exercises, but just a little bit more than that, so you're not pushing more down.
Okay, amazing, thank you. I struggle with incontinence, and I've tried not drinking as much water during the day, but that doesn't seem to be helping. Oh gosh. Everyone's like,
nervous around the panel.
Could you talk a bit about that? So clearly we've got some opinions.
Yeah.
We need to have these conversations, not knowing them. It's not bad. You need to be.
Jenny can answer this in the most professional way, but we know that actually you need to keep hydrated, don't you? So actually, by not drinking water, it's causing more problems, isn't it?
Exactly.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, hydration's so key. It's so important to all your tissues. So in all the area, so pelvic floor, in the vagina, to actually keep the area hydrated is really, really important. And restricting that fluid intake and restricting that of the bladder actually can worsen your symptoms. So the bladder then becomes more sensitive to when you are then filling it with water. So it is really important, even if you are having incontinence, to keep yourself well hydrated. And try not to restrict the fluid intake. And being sensible with the types of fluid that you're taking. You know, there are bladder stimulants like your alcohol and caffeine and citrus drinks. So really important to be aware of how to keep yourself hydrated.
And how does the caffeine, how does that sort of make the problem worse? So they stimulate.
Yeah, so it stimulates the muscle that surrounds the bladder. It stimulates the muscle to squeeze. So that's why when you have a caffeinated drink, it can really affect some people because it stimulates that bladder contraction.
And like when we're talking about overnight, for people, if it's causing sleep problems, which incontinence can, is it okay to sort of limit your how much you're drinking around that time, or during
the night it can, because normally we wouldn't, if you were ideally sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, you might not, one might not wake up or go to the toilet in that time. So it's fine to restrict kind of what you're drinking in the nighttime, but then to make sure that you are getting your kind of 6 to 8 glasses of water in during the day.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, have a look. Okay. Amazing.
I was just going to say, because obviously birthing does cause a lot of problems with pelvic floor. Is there any birthing positions that you suggest would reduce that effect?
Yeah, definitely. So lots of positions are now suggested, and it's really kind of advised that you're not on your back when giving birth, which is quite controversial. But it's actually from kind of the hip position and your pelvic position. So when you're lying on your back and you open your legs, it actually closes down your pelvic opening. So therefore actually making it more difficult for baby to pass through. Whereas if your knees go inwards, you actually open up the pelvis. So best suggestion. Great question.
Yeah, well done.
So best position would be actually in a 4-point or in a side lying. But 4-point kneeling with your legs turned in just opens up the pelvic cavity. I know you have to kind of try and picture it.
I do a lot of things.
So 4-point kneeling or side lying would be preferable.
Amazing.
Wow,
that's a great question.
That's 22 years too late for me.
Spread the gospel, everyone. Don't do everybody. That's amazing.
I think there is a lot of fear around birthing. I remember it as well. Like I was really worried about vaginal tears, and I just think they're so common. I think 9 out of 10 women experience some sort of graze or tear during childbirth if they've got having a vaginal birth, and I was so worried about it. And I feel that if someone had given me that stat or around how common prolapse is, it would have made me feel a bit bit happier in some way, but
Right.
it is such a common thing, and that might make it more easy to talk about.
Yeah, easy to talk about and easy to find the support for.
Yeah.
And again, the common sort of theme that sort of run through today is like advocating for yourself with your doctor and stuff. And if you know this is really common, I know my body, I think this is happening, then you can go and have those conversations with more confidence rather than sort of thinking, well, maybe it's not me, or like you said, what is normal? We don't know. So we need to keep talking about what's normal and what's not so that people can identify those issues.
And there are ways now to help avoid tears. Well, not avoid, but help against having tears during labour. Positioning is one. Perineal massage before giving birth is really important. And actually, there's loads of evidence out now to say that doing your perineal massage 3 to 4 times a week can really help reduce the risk of tears in labour and reduce the risk of instrumental devices being used.
When would you start doing that massage?
At 34 weeks.
At 34
It's
weeks.
just really hard to do when you've got a massive
When you've got a massive bum.
You've got a partner, you need to get your partner to do it
Getting
for
your
you.
partners involved, getting a leg up onto a
Yeah.
a toilet seat and things.
And I love that conversation because, again, I think pregnancy, it's so much about the baby, but actually we need to be looking after ourselves and thinking about our own health and our own bodies and sort of nurturing ourselves so that after birth we can be not only active, happy parents, but like still be active, happy women. Just because becoming a mum doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your body and just say, oh, well, it's all.
And educating women during their pregnancy on kind of a healthy lifestyle and how important that is for you, for baby, and for your aftercare. And actually getting back to kind of a healthy lifestyle after giving birth.
And I know we're going to do a menopause panel literally in 15 minutes, so I know we'll talk a bit about that. But I guess, is there some advice for women who are menopausal or perimenopause, and incontinence is a really big symptom that they're dealing with? What can they do?
Go see a pelvic health physio.
Go see Jenny. Again.
Go see more therapy. Go see Jenny. I'm in London.
And I think talking about digital, improving access. I think the great thing is that, Jenny, you do stuff online. Obviously, it's great if you can see someone in person, but there are things that you can. There are like Pilates classes online or strength classes and stuff. And I think that's really important to think about as well. If you can, I guess people don't know whether there are pelvic health physiotherapists, and if you're not in certain places, you might feel like you can't get access to those people. So, do you have any ideas, on sort of that sort of thing?
Definitely. Well, definitely speak to your GP. If you are getting painful sex, problems with urinary incontinence or fecal incontinence, go and speak to your GP. In terms of resources, there's a great small company that's led by 3 clinicians. One's a sports and exercise medicine consultant, a physio and a PT called Umi. They have a free resource as well as a paid resource, which explains all about the pelvic floor. But they're a really small company. So yeah, there are things out there. They're not always easy to find. You can get pelvic health on the NHS, but the waiting times might be a while, but because it is expensive. So it's fine, like I say, find those solutions more accessible to more people.
Yeah. We've got time for one last question, which I love. It's really a bit playing devil's advocate here, this person, I love it. Can trampolining/rebounding actually help strengthen your pelvic floor? Which I know is something a lot of people that are dealing with might want to avoid it, but can those exercises actually help?
They can to an extent. I think it depends how your pelvic floor is functioning before you get on the trampoline. If you are suffering with incontinence and you go on a trampoline, that's not going to help because it's just going to make it worse. It's then that gradual kind of build up and strengthening which you need and that is required for your pelvic floor to then get onto the trampoline.
Yeah.
And any exercise that you do where you're symptomatic, you want to just try and scale it back to keeping active, but to a point where your pelvic floor can manage and you're not having the symptoms. So it's always about kind of finding that balance of what can you do, for example, from a squat to a squat jump. If a squat jump you're leaking, but a squat you're fine, can we get you doing a squat with heel lifts and then lowering down?
Building it back up to doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So if you love rebounding, then you'll get back there one day, but just
you
maybe
will.
work
but
on the
if you're
pelvic floor.
symptomatic, just do some pelvic floor before pushing through.
I've been asking all of our panelists sort of just for a little tidbit of advice. So if someone is watching this here or at home and is really struggling and has tuned in today because they're looking for a bit of advice, what's your one golden piece of advice that you'd give them?
Go and speak to your GP. Absolutely.
I would say to start with your breathing. So start with actually focusing on taking nice deep breaths, even doing 10 in a row and then doing that several times a day, because like Fiona mentioned, your diaphragm is connected to your whole core and it really assists with your pelvic floor as well. So then from your deep breathing, you can then start with your pelvic floor exercises and just start getting that feel for the squeeze and relax, and then go speak to your GP.
Are we all doing it again?
Yeah, that's back passage.
Live keeping streamed. Hal.
I think for me, it's just a case of it is embarrassing, it is shameful, but try not to feel embarrassed and shameful about it. That it's so common, and actually, I think they say there's between 3 to 6 million people in the UK suffer with some degree of urinary incontinence. Actually, they reckon that amount is double because people are too embarrassed to talk about it. There are people out there who will comfortably talk about their journey with incontinence, and they're your people, you know. Seek help, but just don't feel embarrassed and don't feel ashamed about it, because you know you're not alone, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I just echo that. Talk to your mums, talk to your sisters, talk to your daughters.
Yeah.
You know, by not, you know, you just got to share. You know, you got to share this. You know, women, we just need to support each other and normalize it.
Yeah.
Really normalize it. So just talk to other women.
And I love having this deep conversation about it, where it's not just like, oh, I wet myself hard, I don't want to talk about it. It's like, okay, let's actually talk about it.
And what happened?
And it can really, really help. Like, we wouldn't have that amazing advice about birthing positions. That's like, no one knew that. So amazing. Well, thank you so much. I absolutely loved having this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. So we've got one more talk coming up. Just as a reminder, we've got 20% off of the Blow, which you can use in this store or later at home. We've got blood tests through Holland & Barrett. We've got a bunch of other goodies in the digital good bag, including 20% off Nixie Body knickers, I believe. Is that right?
Wow.
I think so. Amazing. So we'll see you shortly for our menopause panel, which Samantha and Kelly are going to be back for. The dream team. Thank you so much. Let's give everyone a round of applause.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. We did start early today. Thank you so much. We are starting a few minutes late. I can't believe it's our last panel. I'm kind of a little shattered because it's been such great energy throughout the entire day. My name is Lena. I'm the CEO of Parla. We've been recently acquired by Holland & Barrett, so we're now part of the Holland & Barrett team. And this is the first step in normalizing a lot of these conversations that we're having today. And I'm really excited about the menopause one. Holland & Barrett actually just launched a campaign about pausing and listening. They have really made a huge commitment to menopause and have more than 4,000 trained advisors in all their stores. But I think what we actually need to do is normalize the conversation so people even know to come somewhere to have those conversations and get the support that they need. And we have some brilliant women here today sharing their stories. And I hope that this is the first of many conversations so we can continue busting taboos, being able to just talk about our periods, reading and everything as comfortably as possible, because it is normal. And I think that's the biggest message I really want us to get out of this day, is that these are all normal things. We should not be ashamed about it. And we just need to be able to talk about it as freely as we can. So with that, I will hand over to Connie, who is going to moderate this panel, and you will hear from the most amazing women in here with us today. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as Lena mentioned, Holland & Barrett have had an amazing initiative this month. It's Menopause Awareness Month, and they're doing some incredible stuff. And so it's really great that we get to have this conversation today. I think, menopause is inevitable for anyone that has a period, and yet it's still something that we're a bit ashamed about, or there's stigma around, and that is changing, but hopefully this conversation will be a part of that. 13 million women in the UK are thought to be sort of perimenopausal or menopausal, and half of those will be dealing with depression, and a third will be dealing with anxiety. So it's a bit late in the day for my maths, but that's millions of women that are dealing with debilitating symptoms from a mental health perspective, and that's not even getting to the sort of physical side of things. So we really want to kind of jump in and, I guess, to echo what Lena said, Holland & Barrett are really about pausing and listening. So I think today we're going to do a lot of listening to these women who are willing to share their unique menopause journey with us. But we've also got two amazing experts who I thought we could kind of kick things off with, just as I think some people might be watching this and not even know what perimenopause is, and I think we also need to get younger people to just understand what's going on. So Oh, should we do instructions actually? I feel like because I've had nearly all of you on the panel, I'm like, oh, no, it's fine. Sorry. Denise, do you want to introduce yourself? Then we'll go along.
Yeah, so my name's Denise Brothers. I am a nutritionist specializing in women's health, hormones, and the menstrual cycle. And I am also the author of the book, You Can Have a Better Period.
Hi, I'm Kat Armour, known as the Hormone Fairy, and I'm a natural health practitioner. So I use homeopathy, herbs, hypnotherapy, nutrition, and hormone testing to help women with their hormones, but specifically perimenopause and menopause.
Hi, I'm Becky Kearns, and I'm here today to share my personal story of premature ovarian insufficiency, which in other words is early menopause. So yeah, looking forward to sharing that with you.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I've got an Instagram page called The Menopause, where I sort of rant and talk about menopause and how it affects normal women, and just hopefully help other people raise awareness of all the issues surrounding it.
I'm Kelly. I'm the founder of Nixie Body, and I started menopause when I was 43, so that's deemed as kind of early. Yep.
Great. So Denise, can we sort of just start off with, can you explain a little bit about the difference between perimenopause and menopause and sort of what's happening like hormonally at that time?
Yeah, so perimenopause, which I think is a word that not a lot of us are aware of. I've had clients who have said that they've spoken to their GP about perimenopause and the fact that they think they might be perimenopausal, and their GPs have said, oh, it's not a real thing. That's just made up. But we know the research tells us that it's real. We know it's real because we experience it. And so what's happening is that what they're saying now is that there are about 4 phases of perimenopause. Interesting, because there's 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, but I digress. And we know that perimenopause can start in your late 30s. And what you might find is that you have a really regular menstrual cycle, your periods come like clockwork, and then all of a sudden they might come a day or 2 early. And then your cycles get shorter and shorter, and then they become even more irregular. You could go months without having a period. And then you reach the menopause, which is the last phase of perimenopause. And the menopause is actually only 1 day. It's the last day. You haven't had a period for 12 months. So we talk about menopause, but really it's post-menopause that we're talking about, because the menopause is actually only 1 day. And what's happening hormonally is really interesting. And that's where a lot of us can get into a little bit of a twist, because we are making less of a form of estrogen, the dominant form of estrogen during our menstruating years, called estradiol. We're making less of that. And then because we're not ovulating as much, we're not ovulating every menstrual cycle, we're not making as much progesterone. And so that can have an effect on our moods, our energy, our skin, our hair, even the vagina can be drier because of the lack of that dominant form of estrogen during menstruating years. But I know we'll get to this, but I do want to say that when you go through menopause, it doesn't mean that you're no longer producing hormones. You still are. You're just producing less of those powerful hormones that we make during our menstruating years. You're producing a form of estrogen called estrone. So you're still making a form of estrogen, and what we'll talk about later is how we can support that through nutrition.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always learning about this, but I feel like, I don't know if you guys knew all of that sort of in that detail. And it's fascinating. Kat, obviously, you work with women who come to you with symptoms that are really, really bothering them.
Yeah.
What are some of the, I mean, I can't actually remember, isn't there like a list of like the 60 or something crazy about the symptoms of menopause?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know if you can run off all of them, go for it, but if not, the most common ones.
The brain fog's kicking in. The NHS say there's roughly 34 symptoms that are recognised, but like you say, like 40, 50. The most common ones that women think of are the hot flashes, the night sweats, the brain fog, the putting on weight, as well as the lack of libido. But there's some really unusual ones. one of the first symptoms that I tend to see with women, and it can start from the late 30s as that progesterone starts to dip off. And also because women are quite stressed, we're always on the go, we're always busy. So we've got lots of cortisol, that stress hormone in our body, that will then block and lower our progesterone even further. So the first symptoms tend to be late 30s, early mid-40s, is the anxiety, the low moods, the sadness. That tends to be the first symptom. Longer periods, as we said, periods maybe going from a 28-day cycle to a 24-day cycle, a shorter cycle, or maybe going longer where you're skipping periods every 50 days or 3 months and getting longer as well, heavier periods. But unusual ones, and some of these I've had, so some really unusual ones, I've got a new symptom. I like, so that's something that I say to my clients, I've had that one. We can do something here. So tinnitus, like ringing in the ears, and quite often the doctors will say it's an ear infection, which it could be. But if it's prolonged, tinnitus, so it's real ringing in the ears and just a strange sensation in the ears. Burning a tongue or a metallic taste in your mouth, that's one, or the tip of your tongue burning. Itchy skin, almost as if you've got ants or insects inside your body, crawling inside your skin. So dry, itchy skin can be a symptom. Body odor, that's a really unusual one. Actually, the brain fog can be a symptom. Weight gain, all of a sudden, like I was like 39, going to the gym every day, eating healthy. Yeah, all of a sudden I'm getting a bit of a tummy, so that could be a symptom for many women. Lack of libido, so all of a sudden just no longer having that desire. And the mental health side of things. So that is something that we do need to talk about. So many women, their suicide rates are the highest. Women 40, 50 years old, so it coincides with the estrogen, progesterone drop in the perimenopause years. And also divorce rates are the highest, and it tends to be the women, 40s and 50s, that instigate the divorce. And could it be linked with hormones, or possibly there's so many symptoms that go with it?
Can I just say something there? That's really interesting because there is some research that shows that estrogen is the hormone of tolerance. And when and if you notice, after you finish your period and you move towards ovulation, you can be more accommodating, you're more willing to say yes. And then right before you get your next period where estrogen levels are dropping, you might be told that you're being like moody, but that just like this natural tolerance decreasing. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah. And we lose that nurturing as we get older. I don't know if you find it with you have grandchildren, don't you?
Yes.
But we lose that nurturing because the hormones drop. So maybe we're not, like you say, with the tolerance. The tolerance around other people's children maybe becomes.
So I mean, we've spoken about menopause being unique, and I think it's really important to say that not only are there so many symptoms that you could be having, so it could be unique, there are different types. There is surgical menopause. I was talking to someone the other day who's got endometriosis, which is something we were talking about, and then they've had a hysterectomy, and then that's then triggered menopause. There's all these things, and again, we can't just put it in a box and say, oh, at this age, this starts happening to you, and that's what it is, because that's not true. So Becky, I mean, obviously we touched on your story earlier. If anyone was watching the sort of infertility and loss one, could you maybe go back over that story, if you don't mind, a little bit, because I think it's really interesting, that link between the menopause.
And I'm so pleased that I'm here today to kind of show a face of menopause that you don't often see. And I was 27 at the time when my husband and I started thinking about trying for a baby, and so I came off the pill, and my periods came back straight away. But then I was starting to have periods like every 2 weeks, like every 14 days. And it'd be 12 days, it'd be 21 days. And I was Googling everything about trying to conceive. And I thought, it's impossible to make a baby in that time. What's happening? And I went to the doctor. I was turned away 3 times. I was told, you're still young. Just keep trying, just relax. And it was the 3rd time I had to really push for some blood tests. I said, just something isn't right. And at the same time, I was having night sweats as well, and I hadn't put 2 and 2 together because I never even realised you could go through menopause at that age. And I remember getting the blood results back, and funnily enough, I had a text to say your results are fine, they're normal. But because I am who I am, I wanted to know how normal they were. So I asked for the results, and I saw that my follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, was really high. And I knew that it shouldn't be that high. So I then had to tell my GP that he got it wrong. So an important message in there, I think, around empowerment.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel right, keep asking. But yeah, I then went to a private specialist and was diagnosed. I had my AMH level was very, very low. And at the time, my focus was all on fertility. So I didn't really take in any information about the prospect of early menopause. But we then went into 5 cycles of IVF because my egg reserve was so low that we needed to do it now.
Just go for it, yeah.
Just go for it. And we were only yielding 1 or 2 eggs each time. And whilst I was going through this, I had so many hormones pumped through me for the IVF that I hadn't really even thought about my hormones in relation to menopause. And to cut a very long story short, we ended up having children through egg donation in the end. So I now have 3 amazing girls. All thanks to egg donation. And it was only after I had them quite close together. So I had my eldest, and then a year later we conceived twins. And after I had my twins, I'd just finished breastfeeding, and the symptoms just hit me like a ton of bricks. The night sweats, and you talking about mood. Talk about tolerance. I could not tolerate my husband at all. But I almost became like a different person. It was like an out-of-body experience where I knew that I was being completely unreasonable, but there was no control I had over it. And I was really anxious, and I could really feel my mental health suffering. And that's when I went back to the specialist who diagnosed me and said, I think I need something. And he worked with me, and it took quite a few goes to find the right HRT, but now I'm on that, I feel like me again. But I think from a mental health perspective, it was only after having my children, once I'd come out of the I can't have a baby experience, that it really hit me that I was going through menopause now. And by that time I was 31, and I just felt ashamed. I felt old before my time, and I just didn't see my face. I didn't feel like I fit with anything. So again, like the fertility experience, I started talking about it, and more people then came out and said, yeah, me too. And I got in contact. There's an amazing organisation, if you're going through this, called the Daisy Network, who support people who are going through this. It's 1 in 100, I think, women under the age of 40. And some people are diagnosed as teenagers as well, and just never start their periods. And it's heartbreaking, because you wouldn't necessarily think there's a link between menopause and fertility, but depending on the age that you're diagnosed, there really is. And in that sense of, you can have one taken away while the other one arrives. And so, yeah, it's been a real experience for me, and it's something that I want to keep sharing to make sure other people are aware. But hopefully that's...
Thank you. I think it is, like you said, it is really important to have faces that are out there. So I guess, could you find anyone to go to until you found Daisy, or was it quite...
Not really, no. Until I found the Daisy Network, and it was mainly because I started blogging. I've got a blog called Defining Mum, and that was more about my fertility experience, but also kind of the reason for my infertility. And I had women emailing me who had read the blog and said, I feel seen, I feel like I'm not on my own anymore, and that just encouraged me to do more and more. So I got in contact with the Daisy Network, done some speaking for them, and they just do amazing work, because when you're given that diagnosis at that age or even younger, like, there should be some emotional support around that. What does that mean for you? And quite often I've heard of people who have been diagnosed as a 15, 16-year-old, and then off you go, and that's it. There's no counselling or anything around that. So I just think it's so important to have these conversations out there, and to show people that, like, the face of menopause can be at whatever age.
Completely.
Totally.
And again, you sort of said you went back to your doctor, and clearly, like you said, the personality that you are, you kind of are quite happy to go back and push and say, I need this. And I think there's some people that wouldn't have the confidence to do that. And I can imagine being a new mom, I guess maybe because you had that diagnosis before, maybe you were aware it could be this, but you could have someone going through early menopause as a new mom and just thinking, I'm just a stressed new mom, and like, these are these things, and we're not I don't think perimenopause is something that we even consider could be something that is going on when we start to show symptoms in our 30s or 40s, and actually it could well be. So it's really important that we talk about that. Thank you.
Also that it can last a long time as well. I thought you just go through menopause and things like, and
because I'd had my children in between, it took a while for, and then periods did come back, and then they disappeared for like 6 months. Then another one would appear, and I think, am I there yet? Okay, I'm finally there now. But it's not just like a one-time thing. It just happens, and you're in it, and that's it. It's a real process and a journey in a way.
And all these myths that we have to kind of dispel a little bit, that people have to understand the truth of it, and actually it's sharing stories and pausing and listening, which is what Humberbat's all about. It's doing that. So thank you so much.
There must be a sense of grief, and there's a sense of grief that comes obviously Becky that was unable to conceive naturally, that thrown into menopause. But no matter what age, you almost grieve the woman that you used to be, because you start to change. So you have so much going on, or women that are unable to conceive or didn't meet the right partner, and then their eggs are running out, or time's running out. So it's a real process of emotional grieving for yourself.
Lots of grief around.
Does that resonate with you, Samantha, with your sort of experience?
I guess my story maybe is a bit more I say average. There is no such thing, is there? I was completely unaware that I was perimenopausal for them. I would now say, I'm 53 now. I would say about 10 years ago was probably when, similar to you, so similar age. Looking back at the symptoms I was having then, definitely was starting in my early 40s. Was backwards and forwards to my GP. First thing was the increased anxiety and migraines. I started migraines when I started my periods as a 12-year-old. So I would get those every few months, but suddenly these were coming 3-4 times a week. I was never able to go on the combined pill because of the migraines that I had. And so I've had a coil for many years. But it was backwards and forwards to the doctors. I was put on antidepressants, beta blockers, diazepam to cope with, getting on the flight for work, just to get me on the plane. I was on all this cocktail of, it was crazy. I was in a relationship at the time, and he just reinforced that I was going mad, which didn't help. So the anxiety and the migraines were the worst thing. The magic key is, the doctor said when I eventually went there with night sweats, age 48. She said, "Oh yeah, you're menopausal now."
But 5 years of you having no idea.
And then, I mean, with my GP, she said, "Oh, you're menopausal, but we're not going to offer you HRT today. You go away, come back in 6 months' time. If you're really not coping," bearing in mind, I just told her I just didn't want to carry on anymore. But go away for 6 months, come back if you're really struggling. And so at that point, I went back a couple of months later, because I then started blogging about it. I was so desperate to talk to somebody. My girlfriends I wasn't aware of other women that were going through it. So just did this weird thing and thought, I'll just start a blog. Had no idea what I was doing. Thought the mama pause, because my grandchildren were on the way, and I thought, I'm going to be a grandma, which I ended up being mama, which even my bracelet says, which is ridiculous. So just started talking and got my Instagram going to support that. And that's how I got in touch with, some of these amazing women here today. And that ultimately led me to pay privately, because my GP was so, I don't want to disrespect my GP, because there are some fantastic ones out there, but she was not prepared to really explore HRT with me. So I did go down the private route. It was, I had to scrape together the money, but I'm glad I did that, because now I'm on I'm on estrogen. I have the Myrenacol, which has the progesterone in it, and I now controversially have testosterone, which I've got the full shebang. And it's bloody brilliant. There's not an antidepressant in sight. Like you were saying, it's, my mum said, "Oh my God, Samantha's back," because I kind of just I disappeared. And I'm single now, so that was probably a big part of, get rid of all the rubbish in your life. And I did, so a big advocate for HRT. The long-term benefits completely outweigh any risks, as far as I'm concerned. I know it's not for everybody, but for me, I couldn't do my full-time job, look after grandchildren, care for my mum, all the stuff that us women are doing. I couldn't do all that without it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, maybe we could, because I think, thank you for sharing your story, because we spoke on the phone, and I think it's amazing. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
But I do want to maybe just pause there and talk a little bit about HRT, because I think you guys are obviously both natural, sort of the more natural side of things. But I think it's important that we talk about that, because there are still some myths, there are some concerns. Like you said, it's right for some people, it's not. But when we're talking about women that don't want to go on anymore, maybe that maybe it is the right time to do it, and it can be supported by natural lifestyle stuff. So what do your guys take on hormone replacement therapy?
Every woman's different. So I have some clients that are on HRT, testosterone, if they can get hold of it, and they thrive on it. Other women come to me, they've tried HRT, and after a few months they're not getting on with it. I had one of my clients, and she's a close friend of mine, and she phoned me up one day and she said, I need help, you need to come and get me, I'm going to take my life. And I went and picked her up, and I said, what are you going to do? And she said, I'm going to take pills. And I said, have you got them on you? And she gave me a bag of every single pill that she found in her house, paracetamols, everything. She'd been collecting them. And I said, that's it, we're going to the doctor. And she had high blood pressure, so her doctor wouldn't give her HRT because of the risks. Anyway, she did go on HRT, and within a week, she was feeling so much better. So every woman's different, as I said, and it's getting the balance right. So you do have to play around.
Oh, it doesn't. Yeah, it's not one size fits all, and it's moving. It's a movable beast. This menopause. You go. Even. I mean, I believe I'm still perimenopausal because I am still having periods. It's ebbs and flows, and it's learning how to tweak. But yeah, it's not just HRT fixes it. It's a holistic. It's exercise. It's food. I'm very open to the whole
putting in
picture.
That around. So we've got body identical HRT tends to be the gold standard, the one that most GPs are prescribing. It's safer nowadays compared to the pills. Most of it is transdermal, so it'll go in through the skin. Then you've got progesterone alongside. So if you have a uterus, then you must make sure you're taking progesterone alongside, or have the Mirena coil. And then we've got testosterone or Testogel. Not many doctors are prescribing this because we don't have a female brand of testosterone at the moment. We're using a male's testosterone, so we're having it in a very minute dosage. Wow. So it tends to be more the specialist gynaes or doctors that are prescribing that. But it's really important, if you are doing any type of medication, is to make sure you're putting nutrition in alongside supplements, good food, because your body is getting stripped from vital nutrients by taking the medication. So bringing everything into balance, thinking about your stress as well, like you're saying, exercise. So you've got to put everything together. I don't know if you've got anything on the nutrition side.
I agree with you what you're saying about there needs to be a holistic view. I am just a bit worried about the messaging around HRT at the moment, especially over the last 6 months, because there has been a shortage in the UK, and there has been this messaging, I feel, that HRT is necessary for every woman who is going through perimenopause or post-menopause, and I don't think that's true. And I think that, as we've all said, every woman is different, and you have to find the treatment plan that works for you. But I am worried about this very HRT is for everyone message. And I'm also worried about this message that I'm starting to see, that describing menopause as an estrogen deficiency. So it's medicalizing this very natural phase that we all go through. Some of us are more badly affected. I think the stories that you've shared are horrifying, and it affects all of us differently. But to medicalize this phase of life, I find really, really troubling. It's not an estrogen deficiency. We are still producing a different form of estrogen. So I think it's important to kind of have both sides around that. Having said that, I do think that HRT can be beneficial, like as you've so powerfully shared, that it is so beneficial for you. So there really is no one size fits all, and you need to find the solution that works for you.
Yeah, and I think that's the key message, because I've been interviewing some people for Kelly's brand about for Menopause Month and talking about menopause with these great women, and I didn't know much about it. You know, I'm in my early 30s and I haven't started to any sort of things. But what I didn't realize is that HRT, it's a little bit like contraception, right? It's like you have to try it out. Sometimes it might not be right for you. And I think going back to our first conversation that we had at the start of this day, which, you know, is if you're going to the doctors and saying there's this issue and they just give you the first pill that they want to give you and then you just take it and that's the end of conversation, that's not what needs to be happening in women's health. We need to be challenging things. We need to be getting to know our bodies, getting to know ourselves, going back, advocating for ourselves. And I think that goes from whether you're 15 and having irregular periods and they're saying, okay, take this, or you're menopause and you're saying, oh, I'm going through this, and they say take that. I think we've got to know yourself really well and have the confidence to kind of to ask what we want. I'm going to come back to do nutrition and movement and stuff with you in a minute, but I just wanted to talk to Kelly about her experience of menopause.
Oh, okay. So I had years of endometriosis and ended up having a hysterectomy when I was 42, 43. But the surgeon told me that he didn't want me to go into early menopause, so he's left my ovaries in. But within a year, I was, all of the symptoms that you said, I was suffering with rage, literally wanted to kill every member of my family. I was depressed, anxious, palpitations, panic attacks, and literally thought I was going mad. Because all I knew about the menopause was hot flushes and night sweats. So I kept thinking, I didn't know what was going on with me. Anyway, long story short, I ended up having to go to the doctors 3 times within 2 years before I eventually broke down. I had 2 lots of blood tests done, and each time he said to me, your blood tests are fine, you're not perimenopausal, you're not going through the menopause. So the 3rd time I went, I actually broke down and said, you need to give me something now because I think I'm going to kill myself. It was that bad. So he prescribed me some HRT patches, which literally within a week was life-changing. But like you say, it's an ongoing thing. So again, I've been on HRT patches for quite some time. I've also had vaginal estrogen as well because of suffering from UTIs. So again, something that I had to research myself. I found out that I was getting recurrent UTIs, which is linked again to a lack of estrogen. And since I've been using that, I've not had any UTIs apart from when I tested that PeriFit thing. But again, ups and downs, ebbs and flows. I've recently gone back to see another specialist that I paid for because I know that I won't get the information that I need from my GP. And I now have testosterone gel and I take progesterone tablets at bedtime as well, and I'm back on the level. I kind of felt really flat before, and it's not, I wasn't feeling depressed. I just felt like I was just going through the motions of life. I felt probably a little bit dead behind my eyes. But since changing my estrogen patches and the testosterone and progesterone, I actually feel like kind of on the level again and able to cope with stuff and able to laugh at things again. So yeah, so it's been, I'm 51 now, so 8 years of kind of going through the motions of the menopause. And
I know you were just on our pelvic health panel, and so we were talking about like your love of exercise and how good that has been. And I feel like exercise was a massive thing for you.
So I've always exercised, always played sports. I've just started running again. I know it's really important for me to exercise because I know that helps up there as well. I take lots of supplements. I must say I'm in Holland and Barrett all the time. There's one really near to where I work in London, so I've got my card and I'm in Holland and Barrett getting my supplements. I take the gut health, obviously I know is really important. So as I've got older, I've really started to look at what I'm eating, what I'm putting into my body, what I'm drinking. I don't drink much alcohol anymore. I barely drink alcohol. I don't drink tea unless it's herbal tea. I drink lots and lots of water. I take collagen every day. Actually has been brilliant for me because of joint pain. So I was oh my god,
completely.
So waking up in the morning and you're kind of getting out of bed like that because everything hurts and you feel like everything's gonna crack, doesn't it?
Oh my god,
but
what a
collagen's changed that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so good. I use a brand called Colo, which has been absolutely life changing for me. I do the Bio Cult, I think. I take that. I take Is it chlorella and
That's
spirulina as well? Is that for energy? Magnesium,
Yeah.
to take advanced multivitamins.
Yeah.
My God, you've done the niece of
I take vitamin D as well.
Yeah,
Even though I know
same,
it's in the advanced thing, I know that I need vitamin D as well, because I'm always low on that. And what's the other one I take? Oh, there's another. I take 8. Oh, and I have it every day. I have an electrolyte. And because I feel like that sets me up for the day, because I suffer with migraines, and I find that if I'm hydrated in the morning, then that kind of helps me if I know that I'm not going to drink enough water throughout the day. So yeah, I'm literally shake me and I rattle. Yeah,
You make a great
Quite
tune.
embarrassing.
I am.
Denise, how can, before we go into nutrition, I know you're a yoga teacher and movement is something that for all different reproductive life stages you talk a lot about. How can movement help us through menopause, even though I guess with some of these symptoms it might feel like the last thing you want to do at the time?
Yeah, so movement can be so powerful during menopause because we have to think not only about mood, it's so, as you've described, it's so powerful for not only those endorphins, but just calming you and helping you feel like there's like a way out, which I think is really powerful. But our bone health, when we move, when we walk, we're not talking exercise, we're talking movement. So, maybe you came up the escalator here, maybe you walked up the escalator.
You ran.
I ran up the escalator. But that movement is so powerful for the health of our bones. And we know that estrogen, we lose that protective effect of estradiol, during our postmenopausal years, and that has an effect on our bones. And so movement is a way of rebuilding our bones because the bones are a very active tissue. They're constantly breaking down and rebuilding. So movement is so powerful. So I love hearing what you're sharing.
And
weightlifting,
weightlifting, actually, not like big heavy weights, but just doing some weights every day. You need to keep your bones healthy and strong, and that really, they say that weightlifting is the best thing for middle-aged women to be doing, don't they?
It will boost your testosterone as well.
Will it?
Yeah, lifting weights helps boost that natural testosterone.
Yeah.
I guess keep running after 3 little girls is also going to keep you active, whether you like it or not.
In the menopause is quite something, I must say. So I'm active in different ways.
Yeah. Probably more active than all of us.
We've actually got loads of questions, so let's talk about nutrition and a bit of. I really want to hear more about the home. I can never say that word.
No, even my mum can't say it. I've been doing this for years. Homeopathy.
Yes, and then we'll take if anyone's got any questions here, and then we've got a few questions that came in before we even started, and then we might have some more. So let's go. I mean, Kel did a great intro for you for nutrition. And
So nutrition is really powerful because, as I said in the first panel, we eat 3 meals a day. That's 7 days a week. That's 21 different opportunities to add in foods that will change our health. So if you're perimenopausal, you have the opportunity now to build a really great foundation for when you do go through the menopause. So this isn't something that's really passive. There's a lot that you can do. So the basics of nutrition are really at every meal, making sure you're eating enough high quality protein. You're getting really high quality fats. You're getting your greens and you're getting your fiber. You notice that I don't talk about carbohydrates there because we've all gone a bit mad around the word carbohydrates. Fiber and greens are carbohydrates, but it's just taking some of the weight out of that, the pressure. And if you're looking at how you can add those 4 elements to each plate, it's a really interesting way of thinking about nutrition, away from I can't eat this or I can't eat that to what can I add in. And then you're looking at how you can add nutrients that support specific aspects of your health. So when we go through this transition, we're making this different form of estrone. We actually make that in our adrenals, which are these tiny little glands that sit on top of our kidneys, which are in the small of our back. We need vitamin C to support these glands. So we can get vitamin C through food, we can get it through supplements. So like a great liposomal, I don't know if this is on your list.
Probably.
A great liposomal vitamin C is a great way to add in alongside food more vitamin C. Magnesium, really powerful for mood, for blood sugar balance, because that might be something that you notice as you move through this phase of life. You have more sugar cravings, or you might notice that you're just having different food is just different for you. Your hunger is different. Magnesium can help you get back on track in terms of blood sugar balance. Phytoestrogens, I think those are really interesting because they work in the body in a similar way that the estrogen that we produce naturally does. So we have all of these different receptors all over our body, our brain, our bones, etc. And phytoestrogens that we get through flax, yam, chickpeas, beans, cherries, strawberries. I mean, the list goes on. Act as a kind of very weak form of estrogen that can be really helpful. So they can be helpful alongside HRT. I'm not saying that they're an alternative, but they can be really helpful. So there's a lot that you can do through food to support yourself as you go through the perimenopause and beyond. But that's a really powerful foundation to take you through.
That's really interesting.
Wow. Yeah. You want me to add on that? No, I'm very much with you on adding in, especially adding in the foods that are rich in your phytoestrogens. You can add in foods that are rich, help your progesterone levels, foods that help calm your adrenal glands. So as you said, like your adrenal glands start to make some of your estrogens as the ovaries shut down. That's why it's so important to reduce stress. And when we're thinking about exercise, the weight-bearing exercise, less of the running or listening to your body. If you're too tired, don't run, because you're just going to put more stress on your body. That's going to push out those hormones even more and add to the weight gain. So it's a real balance. But I'm very much for the food, supplements, and so there are so many herbs as well that you can take, and they're available in Holland and Barrett. Like so many products that are herbal that will benefit if you don't want to take HRT, that will mimic the estrogens and help to make the estrogens within the body, or alternatively alongside HRT or medication. So it's really important to have that whole balance, see yourself as a whole picture.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive into some questions. If there's any questions in the audience who've had some fab ones, then let me know. Like I said, we've got a few beforehand. So, you have a question? Oh, you asked the best question. You can definitely ask the question again.
I don't know if it's going to be a very good question. I'm not of age of going through menopause at the moment, but there's lots of women in my life that I love and are going through menopause. Is there anything that anybody did for you that really helped you or supported you, or something that you wish that they had done or said that would have helped you?
That is another amazing question.
That is a great question. Can I say, I got my support from my WhatsApp group. So, you're all on, you've got like hundreds of WhatsApp groups from different friends. So one of my friends noticed that I'd start to take myself away, not being part of the conversation. And she actually privately messaged me to say, "Are you okay, hon? Like, what's going on?" I just said to her, "This is what I'm going through. I don't feel great." And to have her to kind of bring up that conversation was so helpful. WhatsApp groups for me have been amazing. I've got all of my friends are about the same age as me, and we've all started to go through it at the same stage, although I was earlier than everybody else. And we support ourselves, we support each other on there. But social media, I was saying earlier, it's a blessing and a curse, but when you've got teenage girls, it's a curse. But for us, using it for support, there's so many fantastic, menopause chat on there that you can kind of dive into. I would say, for me, WhatsApp groups and social media have been amazing. I found out so much and made so many great connections and friends through it. Yeah.
Or go on a TV show and meet Samantha.
Yeah, or you go on the TV show and make a vagina and make a new friend.
What about you?
Similar to you, although I did feel very alone. My girlfriends didn't seem to be going through it. I mean, I was struggling with the relationship that I was in anyway, so I kind of felt that it was that was the problem. But like Kelly, I started this blog and I said, how do I get people to read it? Because I'm writing this stuff. And somebody said, you need an Instagram. So I created the Instagram to support it, and just met women like me. And I remember one of them picked up the phone because I was obviously having a bad day, and just talking to somebody that knew totally what I was going through. It was just so I just started crying because I felt nobody was there for me. I have 2 daughters. They have been beyond supportive, and they'd seen that mum was going really downhill, but they didn't have the information. They didn't know it was menopause. They would do anything they could to help me, but they're very menopause aware now. And their friends, I was saying earlier to the ladies that I was talking to earlier, they're in their it's the women in their 30s that are really curious. They're coming to me in the playground when I pick my grandchildren up from school. They're coming to me saying, we need to, I'm starting to I'm not sleeping very well. I'm getting a bit anxious. I was in the car the other day and I was getting anxious in the car, which is one of those weird classic symptoms that we don't talk about. And I said, I think you might need a chat with your GP. So yeah, girlfriends and daughters and mums are pretty good.
Becky, obviously, you were going through, I think you found sort of like a fertility sort of tribe of people. Have you sort of, through Daisy, have you found people that you can really talk to about what you're going through?
Yeah, so I think very similar to you, I started blogging and thought, so I had the Instagram account as well. And I'd say predominantly people who I connect with are going through fertility journeys, but a lot of them are going through it because of the same reason for me as me. Yeah. So it's just about connecting with people who get it. And there's something about when you say something, they go, oh, thank goodness, me too, that it just makes such a difference. So I would say within my close friendship group, there wasn't anyone who really understood, although they were as supportive as they could be. Speaking to other people, and the Daisy Day was unfortunately cancelled this year, but there's going to be an online version, and it is just about connections, and it's the same for whatever you're going through. You can find other people, it can just transform your journey.
We've got a question, I think kind of always feeds into what you were saying of being when you're, your family aren't going through it, but you're kind of going through it. So they say, my partner and kids just don't understand what I'm going through, and it really feels like it's damaging my relationship with them. Do you have any advice on talking to family members about menopause?
I've got to say I was really lucky with my husband because he's always been really supportive of everything that I do. It's just, I don't know what to say to that. It's so hard, isn't it? It's not an experience that I went through. I felt very lonely. I felt really down. But people recognised that I wasn't my usual self and came to me to offer help and to find out what was going on. It's a hard one, isn't it?
I found that actually getting a bit technical and telling people that, okay, my body's not producing the levels as it was, and those hormones were affecting they're controlling lots of parts of my body, and they've been reduced, so my body's a little bit starved now. I'm not functioning normally, and it's kind of like, oh right, yeah. So actually getting a bit technical has been
education, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not only us as women, but the people around us as well. This is why I'm acting in this way.
I've had these in my hormones all my life, and they're not quite there now, and so all those things are not.
I think it's great. There's a lot of companies now, they're actually doing menopause workshops, aren't they? Specifically for the men, because the men need to understand and recognise the symptoms. And I think that's great. But obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done with that. So it sounds to me like he needs to be educated, and maybe she needs to find the literature that they can go through together. It's a tough one.
When we spoke, I swear you told me a story about, wasn't there some guy that you were, it was a business trip, and he sort of came to you and was like, I think
we were having a business dinner
because you were talking about it. He said, oh, maybe that's what my wife's, and
you can see the penny droppings. I was talking because he said, what is menopause? And I was sort of doing it for the man's version. That sounds very, very sexist. I was doing a simplified version.
For the man's
and you could see the penny dropping. He went, oh right, okay, I need to go home. He was an American. He went, I need to go home and have a talk with my wife
and apologise.
And you could see he looked genuinely upset because there were obviously things that resonated with him that his wife was going through. And he said he didn't know how to support her.
Totally. It's getting the conversation out of the shadows and the education piece, and even having people like on this morning talking about, the doctors saying, we need to just kind of get it out there, which is
like there is a movement now, though, isn't there?
massively.
There's a
The last
massive
few years
movement
it's
now.
changed.
It's changed so much since. I mean, it's funny because I hadn't met you until I met you at the filming, but I followed you on Instagram. I was already following you on Instagram, so it was. It's great to see that so many more people are being vocal about it. I love it. I just think we shouldn't be ashamed.
Okay, I've got a symptom question. So are nosebleeds or dizzy spell symptoms, these have started recently along with hot flushes, or is it something else and should I visit my doctor?
The nosebleeds is an unusual one. I do think when it comes to nosebleeds, it's really important to see your doctor because that could be linked with blood pressure.
Right.
Again, we are more prone to higher blood pressure as the estrogen levels start to drop. We need to think about our heart health because post-menopause, once the periods stop, we are more at risk of heart disease as women. So nosebleeds tend to be something you need to, if they're coming frequently, speak to your doctor because it could be blood pressure. The dizziness, that is a symptom. Dizziness, lightheadedness. Again, it can be linked with blood pressure, but it is a symptom. And then, of course, the hot flushes as the estrogen drops, that can be quite common.
So I guess either way, definitely go and speak to your doctor because it could be perimenopause or it could be something else, or it could be both.
Exactly. I think it's really important that if any symptom you're having, write it down on a piece of paper, your diary. There are so many apps for our smartphones now. Track your periods. That's the biggest one. So many women that I speak to, I do hormone testing and I have to do it on a specific day of the month. So when was your last period? Well, I don't know. And it's so track your periods, track every single symptom, no matter how silly it sounds. Write it down, see if it's happening on a regular basis. Does it happen after drinking a coffee? Many women become alcohol intolerant. So maybe you have the odd 1 glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine, and you feel a bit drunk all of a sudden. So thinking about that, is it linked with the food? Is it linked with your stress levels, your periods? And then you can go to a GP, a doctor, or you can go on Instagram, find a specialist or somebody, and you can say, well, could it be this? So tracking symptoms, diet, stress levels, keeping a diary is really important.
Nice, that's great advice. One question, again, this had come in before our workshop. What question for the panel? Is it common to still have your period whilst you're premenopausal? I'm at age 53. Maybe you can, I kind of touched on earlier, but Denise, maybe you can talk a little bit about what happens with the periods.
Yeah,
what can
happen? Menopause, as we talked about earlier, is when you haven't had a period for 12 months, but you can get these things called flash periods. And I don't know if anyone has watched the new Sex and the City, and just like that. And there's this funny scene funny if you're not actually going through it, where Charlotte, she's wearing a white jumpsuit and she gets her period. And she's saying, oh, well, my period stopped. But this can happen. This is what we call a flash period. It's not common, but it can happen. And interestingly, being on certain forms of HRT can actually prolong periods. So everyone is different, but that's just something to be aware of.
Okay, amazing. Sorry, I got a little bit lost in the chat because everyone's been chatting so much on here, which is it's amazing to see. Do we have time to carry on for a little bit longer to do these questions? Okay, it's going to be a bit of a quick fire. Okay, how many years on average does the process take from peri to full menopause?
So do you want to take this one?
Yeah, again, every woman's different. So it used to be very much that women would go through menopause, period stopping at 51 in the UK. I now see young women going through POI, so periods stopping much younger, but also women 56, 57 still having regular periods. So everyone's different. It can be up to 12 years, this perimenopause. So for me, my symptoms started at 39. I would say I'm coming close to menopause now, so at 46. But you go through a fluctuation of symptoms. So every woman's different. For some women, you might go through it and not notice, and all of a sudden your periods just stop. Lucky women, those. But it can be up to 12 years.
Is it true, though, that so my mum started her menopause at 42, which is around the age that I kind of started anyway. So is it kind of genetic as well? Will you follow the same path as your mother?
Yeah, there's definitely a genetic aspect to it. I think there's also a cultural aspect to this as well, because we see, for example, in Japan, this looks very different. Menopause isn't really as much as a conversation because they experience it completely differently. The conversation in North America is similar to the one in the UK. And I mean, we can have lots of discussions about the influence of nutrition on that, but I think there is a cultural aspect to this.
Yeah.
Someone's asked a question. I'm going to try and sort of make it a bit more succinct, but I guess what they're saying is if you are coming from a mental health aspect and menopause, which obviously, you know, we've heard stories firsthand and you know that's a real thing. If you're sort of processing trauma in your life, can that have an impact on the severity of the hormonal shift and the symptoms, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to stress hormone, cortisol. So, for example, I was widowed a few years ago, and even though I know what I do, the stress that my body was going through, it dropped my progesterone even further, and I had many more symptoms. So if you're dealing with a mental health or trauma, then it can make your symptoms worse. For many women, they may go into earlier menopause as well. So quite often a trauma can stop periods straight away. So I know many women that have become widowed, and their periods literally stop overnight with the trauma. So there's so much you can do. There are, you know, opportunity medication, but hypnotherapy, CBT, other talking therapies that can really help to release that trauma.
Someone said, does it take a GP to diagnose before you can say it's menopause? I'm sure, I mean, your experience is...
I diagnosed before my GP did.
The only reason I got HRT was because I was drama queen and broke down crying and said, I'm not leaving until you give it to me. So, I think they're not trained. They don't have enough training in menopause, do they? So...
And this is the education piece. It's, you know, the medical profession needs to catch up, but also, you know, that's why Holland & Barrett, they've trained up some amazing people in their stores that can kind of help.
That was the first place I went to. First place I went to was Holland & Barrett because I didn't know where else to go because my GP was not giving much. So I came in, and amazing people. I mean, not in this store, but it was another store. But I just wanted somebody to help me. And that was fantastic. But don't be afraid to go to your GP with what you've learned. Because there are lots of menopause checkers. You can get them online, all the symptoms, print one of them out, you know, tick off the symptoms you're having, take that to your GP and say, listen, this is, you know, I'm definitely having these, you know, this is what I'm suffering from. I think it could be menopause. Start the conversation.
Someone said here, once you start HRT, can you not stop? So I guess I don't know the answer. You know, if you go down that route, then you can't change that down the line, or if there's a shortage, or how does that work?
Okay, I'll answer that. You can stop HRT. For some women, they might find that they have the odd symptom coming back, like especially like the hot flashes, maybe the vagina dryness or a prolapse. So it just depends. If you are coming off your medication at any time, do it alongside your doctor. Get your doctor's advice, but start to add in nutrition and supplements so that you have less symptoms as you come off.
Someone's asked a question which I'm really interesting because it's a conversation I've had with a couple of women recently is, does the panel have any thoughts and information about dementia in relation to menopause? Now, I mean, the angle that I'm coming from is I was speaking to someone, Neen's, you know, and she was saying that her dad had dementia and then she started to have brain fog and memory loss, and so thought she had early onset dementia because she didn't know about perimenopause. So I guess that's why I find that a really interesting question, but I don't know if there's sort of a link that you guys are aware of from a sort of hormonal...
research. I believe there is research going on. I mean, you probably have more information, but very much there is research going on between the link. Because you tend, I mean, I don't know the numbers.
And is that what that you can, once you hit perimenopause, you're more likely to, or
we know that estrogen is very protective on the brain, and there's a genetic aspect to this as well. So you can have testing done to see if you have the gene that predisposes you to dementia. But having said that, just because you have the gene doesn't mean that you will actually have dementia. But there is a hormonal aspect to it because estrogen is very protective on the brain to the brain.
Okay, it's really interesting. I really want to learn more about that for sure.
It's one of the worst symptoms, isn't it? The brain fog when you're having a conversation with someone and you can't remember the word that you were going to use next.
Or your name.
It's
I mean,
quite scary.
It is.
When you suddenly think,
and then you start seeing it like
Yeah,
very
and in a
nice.
work
Yes,
environment,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just embarrassing
Yeah.
because you think you're this normal, slightly intelligent person, and then you
Mid-sentence,
just they ask you quite a simple question, you just
blank.
you literally go, it's terrifying.
You know, I mean, menopause and pause in the workpause. We could talk. Oh, okay, that's
That's
a whole
other topic.
conversation.
We'll come back for
But
that one
it's-
next time. Yeah.
definitely. But it's
Yeah.
because that's your confidence in your cognitive ability. It's all
Yeah.
something. I'm trying to keep up these questions. It's amazing. I think where can I go to get tested for hormone levels if the doctor won't do it?
So you can the hormone test. When it comes to blood tests, so many women I find go to the doctors and the doctor says your tests are normal.
Yeah.
Even your doctor when yours weren't.
And mine, yeah.
So the doctor, a blood test is looking for elevated levels of follicular stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, which is why so many women, early perimenopause, still having regular bleeds, their test results come back normal. So symptoms is the best way to check. Blood tests, you do have to take them on a specific day of the month, hence why you need to track your periods. So you can get them obviously through different tests through stores such as Holland & Barrett. You can buy them online. I do blood tests with clients. I also use a urine test with my clients. I use the Dutch test. Quite expensive, but it's a really useful test. Other things to think about is getting your thyroid checked as well. So thyroid health is really important. Yes, so you can, if your doctor won't test, you can go private. They're not really, some of the tests, if you can do a finger prick blood test, you can get them for around £90 or more.
Can I just say something about the thyroid? If you think you might be perimenopausal, it's really important to have your thyroid checked. So this gland here at the base of your throat, because symptoms of hypothyroidism, so an underactive thyroid, are very similar to the symptoms of perimenopause. And there have been cases where women have been diagnosed as, I say that because it is a natural phase of life, as perimenopause, but then they dug a little bit deeper and they found out that actually they have hypothyroidism, so an underactive thyroid.
Yeah, I've had both actually, and I thought my HRT wasn't working and went back to being exhausted and all of these symptoms, and I tested my thyroid and I've got that as well. And I think my early menopause is all part of an autoimmune disorder, so I've got pernicious anemia as well, so lack of vitamin B12, and I think sometimes there's things that are connected, and I was like, is this because I'm a tired mom? Is this because of menopause? Is this my thyroid? And it can be really confusing at times.
And checking your cortisol levels as well. So you can do that with a saliva test, and that's really useful because, again, symptoms of high cortisol or low cortisol are very, very similar to the perimenopause symptoms. So
amazing. Like I said, it's all about knowing your body, getting the knowledge, as much knowledge as you can about your body, and not always just going down one route and then kind of saying, well, that's what it is. It's actually, the more we know, the more information, the better, I guess. And there is 20% off on Holland & Barrett's blood test if you want to get to know the body in those different ways. And over this weekend, and that'll be in our email. So I'm going to wrap this up now, but I've got one final question. Is if anyone is watching this in store, online, and is struggling, really struggling with their symptoms, what's your one kind of golden piece of advice?
If you're struggling, reach out for support. We've heard so many stories of these amazing women reaching out and getting the support they needed. You may have to push, but please reach out. You're not alone.
Yeah, I would say talk about it. Women, men, start talking about it, and don't be embarrassed. That's the biggest thing. You may feel that you're going crazy. Yeah, if you speak out, you'll find other women or will be in the same boat as you. Speaking out to others.
Mine would be just empower yourself with knowledge, and don't be afraid to, if someone doesn't help you, go to somebody else, because it's your body and only you know how you're feeling. So I just think it's so important to just keep asking questions.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what you guys have said, and if you reach out to somebody, you don't get the response that you need, go to the next person. Go, just find you. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? Find your tribe. I mean, I found these guys through Instagram, and they kind of saved me in so many ways. So just keep connecting with people and empower yourself with the knowledge.
The best advice I heard recently was be a drama queen. Don't be afraid to be a drama queen. So if someone's not listening to you, be bloody hysterical, you know, and make them listen to you. Just don't leave the room until you've got what you need. Don't, that's the only way that I got help that I needed. So I'm not embarrassed.
And even the terms like drama queen and hysterical, like it's all just their only thing to tell women, oh, just shush, you're being annoying. And actually, forget that. Just go and do what you've got to do and advocate for yourself, and don't worry about annoying anyone.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. I can't believe this has been an amazing day. Thank you for everyone that's joined us here and online, and all our panelists. And I think, you know, especially with menopause, but with all other sort of health stuff, Holland & Barrett are always here to listen and to talk. And they've got some amazing menopause advocates in store now. So if you are struggling, like you said, reach out to various different people, but definitely come to Holland & Barrett if you're struggling, because they're people that are here to help you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, I mean, I'm just wrapping up now, but I mean, from Parla, from Holland & Barrett, thank you so much, everyone. And thanks for our amazing panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.